Welcome to NTD Newsroom. I'm Fiona G. Beijing will be increasing tariffs on U.S. imports from 84% to now 125%. That's in retaliation against the U.S.'s decision to hike China duties to a total of 145%. In today's White House presser, Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt says that if China continues to retaliate, it will not be good for the country. Now, the Trump administration is set to revoke benefits for illegal immigrants on the FBI terror watch list. We'll be speaking with a White House correspondent for the Inside Scoop. The Trump administration is asking a federal judge to pause a lawsuit against the U.S. Air Force Academy, which accuses it of race-based admissions. The administration says the school has changed its policy. House Republicans push back against potential cuts to Medicaid as they prepare their reconciliation bill. We'll have the latest on that. The Pentagon fires the commander of a U.S. base in Greenland. The Defense Department says she undermined the administration's message on policy toward the Danish territory.
This is NTD Newsroom, live from our global headquarters in New York City.
President Donald Trump is having the first physical of his second term at Walter Reed National Military Medical Center today, also known as the President's Hospital. It marks his first annual physical of his second administration, and it'll be also the first public information on Trump's health since an assassination attempt against him during a rally in Butler, Pennsylvania in 2024. Trump is set to turn 79 in June. He'll be 82 by the end of his term. Now, the latest in a tit-for-tat battle between the world's two largest economies, China has raised tariffs on U.S. goods to 125% now. Chinese leader Xi Jinping made his first public comments on the escalating trade war, saying in a statement today that China is, quote, not afraid. Now, Beijing said the new import rules will be enforced beginning tomorrow. China has indicated it does not intend to go higher than 125%, saying it would be meaningless to engage in further escalation. This comes after President Trump raised tariffs on China to 145%. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent previously criticized China for its retaliatory tariffs, saying it would ultimately hurt China more. He noted that China's exports to the United States are 5 times greater than U.S. exports to China. Now, on Wednesday, that was 2 days ago, Trump paused his latest round of tariffs for 90 days for all countries except China. White House officials say the president is waiting for Beijing to break the impasse, but Beijing has repeatedly refused to arrange a leader-level phone call. Xi Jinping has instead launched a week of high-stakes diplomacy with other trade partners. U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer said that he'll be speaking to his Taiwanese and Israeli counterparts today. He confirmed this during an interview with Fox News.
Right after I'm done with this TV spot, I'm going to be speaking with my counterpart in Israel. Over the last 2 days, I had a long discussion with the Vietnamese. We're speaking with the Taiwanese later today as well. I have a full dance card.
Greer said he was speaking with multiple countries. That's after President Trump said yesterday that he would temporarily lower the tariffs on dozens of countries. Greer stressed the importance of the United States diversifying its imports to make it less dependent on Chinese goods. He added, quote, "We do import a lot from China, and that actually, to me, underscores the urgency of the situation." Greer was asked this morning to respond to Chinese regime leader Xi Jinping's remarks.
I'm not going to further comment this morning. Thank you, though.
Is the U.S. engaged in negotiations with China?
Not at this point.
The European Union and China have agreed to look into setting minimum prices for Chinese-made electric vehicles instead of tariffs imposed by the EU last year. A European Commission spokesperson said yesterday that the EU Trade Commissioner spoke with China's Commerce Minister. Both sides agreed to look into setting minimum prices. The spokesperson said that. Now, China's Commerce Ministry said in a statement that negotiations were set to start immediately. Previous minimum price deals agreed to by the EU have been for simple commodities rather than complex products such as cars. The EU increased tariffs on Chinese-built EVs to as much as 45% last October. The EU spokesperson added that the next meeting between European and Chinese officials is expected to be held in Beijing in July. Retired Lieutenant General Dan Kane will be the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff after a confirmation vote early this morning. The vote was 60 to 25. The late vote came after delay tactics from Senate Democrats. That was a response to Trump's firing of former Chairman C.Q. Brown, which they say was unjustified. Now, despite the protest, Kaine received bipartisan support, with the Senate Armed Services Committee voting 23-4 to advance his nomination. During his confirmation hearing, Kaine vowed to serve apolitically and said he was willing to be fired if asked to carry out illegal orders. White House Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt just spoke to reporters today as President Donald Trump undergoes his annual physical at the Walter Reed Medical Center. Leavitt kicked off the press conference with details about the recent release of Russian-American ballerina Ksenia Karelina.
Last night, Ksenia Karelina arrived back safely in the United States after being detained in Russia for more than a year. Since Inauguration Day, President Trump and his team have secured the release of more than 40 detained Americans abroad. This is more than half of the number of Americans released by Joe Biden in 4 years. And President Trump has brought these Americans home in 80 days. This administration will continue to work hard to bring Americans home from around the world.
Leavitt also touted positive economic news, citing a 2.4% drop in the consumer price index. The White House press secretary reported drops in prescription drug prices, airfare, and car insurance as well. Now, Leavitt also promoted President Trump's economic agenda, specifically his trade and tariff strategy.
On that note, more than 75 countries have now reached out to the Trump administration, eager to address the trade issues that have exploited America and hurt our workers in the process. The phones have been ringing off the hook to make deals, and these countries wisely heeded President Trump's warning not to retaliate, and as a result, they were rewarded with a 90-day pause and substantially lower reciprocal tariff rates during this period so potential solutions can be achieved. Past presidents just willingly accepted the failed status quo on trade that ripped off our workers and our companies. But that's not who this president is. He creates his own leverage and negotiates deals better than anyone else who has sat in the Oval Office before him. And that process is currently underway.
Leavitt focused in on China, which remains in a tariff standoff with the United States. The White House press secretary said that a deal remains possible and that if China does not want to make a deal with the U.S., it'll ultimately hurt China the most. And now joining us to break down everything that's been going on in the White House and that press briefing we just heard there from Karoline Leavitt is Mike Leon, NTD News contributor and host of the podcast, Can We Please Talk? Mike, always great to see you. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday, Fiona. Thanks for having me.
All right, let's start with the big one, tariffs, right? We just, as I just said there, right? Clearly, the White House has a stance here on China's retaliation, and they're saying, hey, at the end of the day, this is going to be worse for China than for the U.S., and at the end of the day, China is going to have to come to the table at some point. What are you hearing about any sort of concerns regarding tariffs right now?
Yeah, I think the concern, Fiona, is shared amongst, small business owners, because what's going to happen now is that, you plan your fiscal year out, right? You make projections for the whole year. For any small business owner, let's say somebody like in retail, for example, that already relies on importing or exporting, shipping goods, et cetera, to keep their business afloat, they have to figure out expenditures, what is some overflow cash, like should they be, kind of hanging on to their purse strings as opposed to spending on other parts of the business that could amplify the business, marketing costs, promotional efforts, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that's kind of the wait and see approach that I see from a lot of people. And again, it varies based on the industry, because depending upon what you either import from China or get exported from China back, that's cheaper than making it here in the United States or getting it done here in the United States or somewhere else. I think that's the thing that companies are going through right now. Just to give it an example for somebody like me in the private sector who does stuff in product and technology, it's tough to make things in the United States, especially when your resources are engineering hours, right? And you're getting statement of works from these firms, and it's cheaper to offshore it, Fiona, like that's just the case, right? And a lot of small business owners are going through that right now. Maybe they're having to upend their fiscal and take a look at what they want to do for the rest of the year because of the tariff impact. But I think because of China, it's going to depend on the sector. It's going to depend on the industry, right? But I think a lot of people right now are kind of in that same boat. Is this going to continue to remain throughout the year from 145%? And if so, what's another country that we can leverage? Maybe it's internal here in the US, or maybe it's somebody else that manufactures the same thing, makes the same thing, and we can get a comparable price. And I think that's kind of where a lot of small businesses that I've talked to, especially here in the Florida area, are kind of impacted, and what they're reacting to, as this is an ongoing situation daily.
Now, of course, these are all very legitimate concerns from these business owners. You mentioned there the difficulty, right, one of prices when it comes to sourcing, whether it be materials or labor, as well as the sort of expertise and just materials in general, the availability of it. Do you think to a certain degree President Trump's promise of deregulation could help to solve some of those issues or help to lessen some of those concerns?
I mean, it could. Look, I want to go to the overarching point. The reason he's done all of this, Fiona, and I've talked to so many different people about this, because I am not an economist, as you can tell, Fiona. I'm not the economist. The economist experts have all told me two things. One, this has been Trump's MO for forever. He wrote a book about it, right? He likes to cut a deal. He's using tariffs as a negotiating ploy. He doesn't see it as actually leveraging the 5, 10, 15, 20%, whatever it is that the administration announces. He doesn't see that as the final number. He sees it as a bargaining chip to get countries to come over here and renegotiate this. The problem is, as economists will tell you, the US already set this up decades ago. This was all set up post World War II. So you're going against things that other administrations have done that didn't need to be upended. Now, in terms of the deregulation, yes, maybe some of that will actually help with this. But I think what's been really pivotal, or at least something that I've noticed the most, has really been how much he's really aimed it at China. He feels China is the epicenter of where a lot of companies, and China and Beijing has mentioned this in press releases, right? They're going to work with our allies, and they're going to reach out to them and say, hey, why don't we cut a deal? So there is, it was asked in the press briefing earlier today, like, what is stopping a country that's an ally of ours from already working with China, because we're treating friends and foes alike in this tariff trade war tit for tat situation, like you labeled it before, Fiona. So this is part of it, right? Like this mass uncertainty and confusion that trickles to the markets. That's why we see the markets go down. Then they have a little bit of a boom back, but they're still not at the same percentage rates. And I think maybe the deregulation does help with all of it, but the uncertainty and the volatility doesn't help with any of it, especially when it's self-inflicted and self-created, when there didn't need to be this. But again, in Trump's eyes and the administration's eyes, and he's within his right to think this way, he thinks that we have been taken advantage of for far too long, and he wants to reset the global trade market.
Mike, to that point of the concerns of pushing U.S. allies to China, we heard just then Press Secretary Leavitt say, hey, if you're worried about that, just look at the 15 or so offers that are already on the table in the first few days of these 90 days. We also saw the Australian government just a day or two ago saying that they will not be working with the Chinese government, as the Chinese government has called on them to do.
Yeah, no, I mean, and that's the point, right? Look, Karoline Leavitt said this a few times in there, and she's right about this. The U.S. is too big of a market. It's too big of a footprint. It's too big of a consumer base that would buy foreign goods, right? So to alienate an entire market, as somebody who has, done total addressable markets, right? When you're doing a product launch and you want to reach out to what's the total addressable market here in North America, what's it globally, right? You can't leave out the United States from that and the 334 million or so people that live here in the US. Anybody that does that would be asinine to do that. However, what you can do is kind of to your point, not circumvent, but you can work with people that make things similar for a cheaper cost, and then figure out where you can saturate in other places that maybe you haven't saturated your product with respect to that. So I would love to hear more from the administration of who are these actual countries that are coming to the negotiating table, and what is it that is being negotiated? What is the percentage, and where's the finality in all of it? Because the finality in all of it, Fiona, is what the market is looking to and what the market reacts off of. The volatility and the uncertainty doesn't help, but they want to know the finality of it. What's the final number? So that way we can start playing nice with these folks, and that it'll trickle backwards, like we just mentioned, to the small business owners. Now they'll know, okay, now I can import from X country because the tariff margin is nil or it's X percentage. And I know that what that's going to impact to my operating budget, my cost for the rest of the year, and that'll lead to my projections and so on and so forth.
I'm sure there'll be more details coming out sometime within the next 90 days. Mike, last question on tariffs before we move on here. We're hearing from Democratic senators like Adam Schiff, Ruben Gallego. They're calling for an investigation into alleged insider trading after President Trump paused these reciprocal tariffs. The White House is responding, accusing these senators of playing, quote, partisan games. Mike, how likely are we to see a real investigation come out of this, or do you think this is just noise right now?
I'm so glad you said the phrase real investigation. And I think therein lies the problem, right? Because on the surface, it doesn't look good when a president of the United States is taken to a social media platform and telling people to invest in something, and then it rises. And then you see him in a press conference later on, and he points out to Charles Schwab, which is a video that has been making the rounds on social media, saying, hey, this guy just made millions of dollars, because of my message on social media. The impropriety of that is not great. However, is that legally wrong? I don't know. We need an investigation. So I think the one thing that I would point out, Fiona, is in those notes from those senators has been, and Elizabeth Warren said this, the most vociferous of all that I can listen to or find, is that it should be an independent investigation. I think right now, anybody who's listening to this, anybody who's going to be in the comments when this video goes online, Fiona, they're going to be like, oh, what's independent? They're going to roll their eyes. We need independent investigations. I think the White House would welcome, if it rose to that level, some type of independent investigation. But again, I think there is a little bit of political gesturing on this front, but I also think that they have a reason for bringing this up, because if somebody else on the opposite side of the aisle had done something similar, especially from the executive branch, and had posted it to social media, and then the market fluctuation happened, and you point to a case example sitting right next to you of somebody who made money from that, who's a friend of yours, it would scream of impropriety, right? So I think the key word is back to what you said, real investigation. Do we ever get one? Do we get one that's actually independent from all of this? I don't think we will, Fiona.
All right, let's talk about El Salvadoran President Nayib Bukele, because he is going to be at the White House on Monday to meet with the president. Based on everything that we've been seeing in terms of these deportations to CCOT, the ongoing lawsuits against the administration over some of those deportations, what can we expect from that meeting?
Yeah, I think, look, I want to start this off with a baseline premise here. Something that I've covered a lot is Bukele's regime and what he's done with El Salvador since he's come into office as the youngest president in that region's history. And one of the things that he really wanted to tackle was crime. It was really around gang crime, right? So I think it kind of feeds hand in hand to what President Trump has run on in terms of labeling a lot of people in these MS-13 and some of these other gangs that have emanated from that area. Problem is, legal battles, just like the Garcia case that got ruled on by the Supreme Court, that's not a gang member. He wasn't a gang member. He's never been a gang member. So this is the problem that we're having. What do I expect from the meeting, Fiona? The El Salvadorian president ran on this, and he's cleaned up a lot of what his country has done. For good or for worse, there's a lot of people that have emigrated back to El Salvador, and they have created at least a little bit more of a stable hub and country where we're getting less migration. It's gone down year over year just based on CBP data of people leaving El Salvador to come to the U.S. I think President Trump sees El Salvador as an example of if a country like that can do it and tackle crime, then those folks won't actually come to the United States and flood our country, whether that be good, bad, or indifferent in terms of how you take the word flood our country. So I think when I think the meeting will have effect-wise is that he will champion some of the things that Bukele has done, has offered to do in terms of helping him with the cleanup. The problem is, and I want all of this to be done in compliance with the law. I know the administration has echoed that, but right now in the Garcia case, we haven't seen that. And everyone is afforded due process here in this country, especially if you have not been committed, have not been convicted of a crime, you've not been charged with a crime, you should be afforded your due process. Yes, the administration has a different policy position in terms of visa status and people that overstay their welcome, and they're within that right to execute that to the fullest extent of the law. And I just want the law to be followed in all of these cases. I hope that the administration starts to actually, thanks to the Supreme Court's ruling on this Garcia case in specific example, starts to do that. But I expect from this meeting that President Trump will champion some of the things that Bukele did in El Salvador, not only from an immigration standpoint, but from a cleanup standpoint in terms of what he's done with crime in his country.
Yeah, and I'm sure we'll be hearing some updates on Monday, also some updates hopefully on those Iran talks tomorrow. Mike, Leon, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Fiona.
Coming up next, a fatal helicopter crash in the Hudson River kills all 6 aboard, including a family of 5. Officials have identified the victims as they work to recover the wreckage and determine the cause of the crash. For more on this topic, we'll be having our reporter Chris Bob on site after this break.
As we naturally age, many people are getting zero amount of this incredible and unique substance. That's when we start seeing an impact in our joints, skin, nails, and even our digestion.
People ask me, Dr. X, what is the #1 supplement I should be taking? My answer is multi-collagen protein.
People's reactions to me, people were like, what are you doing? What is going on? You look amazing. You have a glow about you.
What makes Ancient Nutrition Multi-Collagen stand out from other brands? 10 types of collagen. It's grass-fed, pasture-raised with vitamin C and probiotics. It's proven to reduce joint discomfort rapidly, continuously, and persistently. It improves the appearance of crow's feet after 4 weeks and improves skin tone after 8 weeks. And it promotes hair thickness, growth, and a reduction in hair breakage.
It has transformed everything from my hair. Like, my hair was starting to kind of just, come out, and I don't have that anymore. My skin feels amazing.
Call the number on your screen and find out how to get a free bottle when you order, plus free shipping and our 30-day money-back guarantee. And as a bonus, we will include Dr. Josh Axe and Jordan Rubin's revolutionary book, Multi-Collagen Makeover, free with your order, plus free shipping and free returns.
I have implicit trust in Dr. Axe because the plan worked. I'm living proof of it.
This is the collagen protein that is backed by clinical studies. It's what my family uses, it's what I use, and I know you're gonna benefit in a big way as well.
Love the results or get your money back. This special TV offer is not available in stores. Call the number on your screen or go online now.
Hi, I'm Ryan Blaney, a third-generation race car driver, and we dedicate a lot of our time to going as fast as possible. My grandpa Lou is the reason why my dad and I started racing, and I'm really proud to follow in his tracks. But when my grandpa was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, it was a very unexpected bump in the road for us. I've learned a lot on this journey with my grandpa Lou, and the memories of my grandpa will always be with me. And in our family, we're used to getting involved, and I encourage you to do the same, especially when it comes to caring for your loved ones. When I think about Alzheimer's and the impact it had on my family, I recognize that losing a race isn't such a bad day after all. It's important to notice if older family members are acting differently, experiencing problems with their memory, or having trouble with routine tasks. Talking about Alzheimer's can be really tough, but if you notice something, have a conversation with your loved one. Encourage them to see a doctor or offer to go with them. Early detection of Alzheimer's can give your family time to explore support services, make a plan for the future, and access available treatments. If you or your family are noticing changes, it could be Alzheimer's. Talk about seeing a doctor together.
Thanks for staying with us. We're continuing our coverage of the tragic story out of Jersey City, New Jersey, where a helicopter crashed into the Hudson River, claiming the lives of 6 people, including a family of 5. The crash is being investigated by the New York City Police Department, Coast Guard, Army Corps of Engineers, and National Transportation Safety Board. The victims were identified today. And for more on this story, let's go now live to Jersey City, where NTD's Chris Bob has more. Chris, what do we know so far about what happened?
Thank you. I'm here in the Newport area of Jersey City where the crash happened. We know that a helicopter, which was meant for sightseeing, a Bell 206, took off in lower Manhattan yesterday around 2:59. It did a little sightseeing around the Statue of Liberty. It went to the George Washington Bridge. Then it came here to New Jersey, where it fell apart midair and crashed into the river around 2:15 p.m.
So, Chris, what more do we know about the victims so far?
So we know that there were 6 souls on the helicopter, a pilot and a family of 5. The father is Agustin Escobar. He was a longtime employee at Siemens, recently he's the CEO of their transit infrastructure program. He and his wife were there visiting him on business, and he was there with his 3 children. His wife and one of the children were celebrating their birthday, the wife's 40th birthday, and one of the children, who was 8, it was turning 9 today. So that's what we know so far. The pilot is still, we don't know the identity of the pilot of the helicopter. We're going to have a press gaggle a little later, around 3:30 in Jersey City, and we should learn some more from the NTSB.
Absolutely devastating. Our hearts go out to their families and loved ones. Chris Bob, keep us updated. Thank you. And in a separate new aviation incident, a small plane crashed this morning in South Florida near major interstate highway and railroad tracks. 3 people were killed and 1 was injured in that crash. The Federal Aviation Administration identified the plane as a Cessna 310. Boca Raton Fire Rescue said the crash emitted a fireball when it hit the ground, injuring a person in a nearby car. Now, the police department there said in a social media post that several roads near the airport were closed near Interstate 95. We'll have more details on this story as well as it develops. Moving on now, the Trump administration today announced a change in the U.S. Air Force Academy's admissions policy. Race will no longer be a factor in its application review. This is what it had to say in a court filing. NTD's Arlene Richards has more.
The Department of Justice on Friday asked a federal judge to pause a lawsuit against the U.S. Air Force Academy. The lawsuit filed in December accused the Academy of unconstitutional race-based admissions. Now, the Justice Department says the parties have agreed to put the case on hold while they discuss details of the Academy's new policy. They say the litigation against the Academy could become moot. The military school had long used race to boost enrollment of Black, Hispanic, and other minorities. The plaintiffs, Students for Fair Admissions, were seeking to build upon a 2023 Supreme Court case it won against Harvard and the University of North Carolina. The highest court rendered those universities' race-conscious admissions policies unconstitutional. After the ruling, the group launched new lawsuits against the Air Force Academy, the U.S. Naval Academy, and the West Point Military Academy. The Biden administration supported the use of race as an admissions factor to prevent the appearance of distrust within the armed forces due to a scarcity of minority officers. But President Trump signed an executive order on January 27th ordering an end to diversity, equity, and inclusion practices within the military. The parties are continuing to discuss the details of the Academy's new policy and its effect on this lawsuit. Arlene Richards, NTD News.
The Trump administration is continuing its efforts to fulfill its campaign promise of fighting illegal immigration. And now for the inside scoop on the latest in this matter is Reagan Reese, White House correspondent for the Daily Caller. Reagan, always great to have you on. Let's talk about your latest exclusive report on the Daily Caller. Now, you wrote that, quote, the Trump administration is revoking the parole of thousands of immigrants who they have found to have criminal records or to be on the FBI's terrorist screening center watch list. Tell us more about this.
Yeah, so what the administration found was that from 2023, about 6,300 immigrants, were granted parole and granted benefits as they came into the country. And so these are all all immigrants that were coming in during the Biden administration. And these 6,300 immigrants were found to be on the FBI terrorist screening center watch list or to have criminal records. And they were receiving benefits through this grant of parole. So some of that includes getting Medicaid. They had Social Security numbers. They were allowed to have student loans, for example. All of these, people that the government had flagged to potentially be terrorists, that have criminal records that were let in during the Biden administration. And so what the Trump administration is doing is they're correcting this. They're taking away these immigrants' abilities to have these benefits, to, have Medicaid, to have these student loans that the administration feels that they do not deserve because they pose a threat to the country.
And I have some of those numbers here with me, some of those specific numbers. I'll read them out. 905 collected Medicaid, which was a total of $276,000. 4 of those actually are on the terrorist watch list. 41 collecting unemployment insurance for a total of $42,000 in benefits. 22 received federal student loans for a total of $280,000. Reagan, is the administration expecting to find more cases like this?
So my understanding is that they will continue to investigate this. I'm not sure how many they expect to continue to find. A key detail, I think, in this is that this was dug up by Elon Musk, Donald Trump's DOGE, their Department of Government Efficiency. And so, as much as DOGE is looking into weeding out areas of the government where they don't think that funding and, funds and benefits should be spent, the administration will be continuing to investigate that. So I think that's a good indication of whether we are to see more.
Then what's next, Reagan, after they cut these benefits and the parole for these individuals? What happens to them next?
That's a really great question. I think that's something that the Trump administration will probably start to speak to in the weeks to come. If what the administration has done already tells us anything, it tells us that the administration is really taking immigration and border security seriously. And so to the extent that these individuals should not be in the country, there are some of these individuals who were granted parole that are legal immigrants. They're not always considered illegal immigrants if you're granted parole. And so I'm assuming on a case-by-case basis, just given what we know about parole and who is granted parole, that they will be taking a look at those cases. But again, I think that's something that the Trump administration will probably start to speak to, just given how I think thorough they've been on the border crisis.
Reagan, staying on this topic of what happens to these illegal immigrants, we also heard President Trump in yesterday's cabinet meeting acknowledging the need to take care of the agriculture industry, the hotel, hospitality industry. And he mentioned that maybe in the future they'll allow some of these people back into the country if their employer can vouch for them, although there was no clear policy. It was a passing remark really from the president yesterday. According to the 2024 agriculture report, about 40% of U.S. crop farm workers are undocumented, so it's a significant portion. Have you heard anything else about a potential plan like this?
I have not, but man, these cabinet meetings have been so interesting and the amount of news that has come out of these cabinet meetings and the way that the president has gone down the line and asked all of his cabinet officials to basically brief him and brief the American people on their updates. And, I think we're learning a lot about Trump's worldview and his policy through these cabinet meetings. These are being held somewhat regularly. I think that's what the Trump administration has committed to. And so we're probably, hopefully, going to get more details on these as much as President Trump continues to hold these cabinet meetings. And I think this is something that is a bit different from what we saw with the last administration. We now know that aides were conducting a majority of President Biden's, business with his cabinet. We did not see the cabinet meet very frequently under the Biden administration. And so in terms of getting more answers on this, that's something that maybe we will have an opportunity to press the president on in a future cabinet meeting.
And the president, we also saw him calling for cutting federal funding to sanctuary cities in a Truth Social post yesterday. Have you heard anything about that?
That I also am unable to provide you any updates that I have on that. But, it's definitely immigration. The border crisis has become this focal point, I think, for the administration. And, under all of the DOGE and the tariff stuff, the administration's work on the border crisis, I think, has gone underreported on. And so what they end up doing here with these sanctuary cities, if they will pull funding, I think is going to be an interesting development. We definitely have seen them not be afraid to pause or freeze funding to areas of the country that they think are misusing them. Let's take the Ivy Leagues, for example. The administration has paused over $2 billion to the Ivy Leagues because they're investigating them for alleged anti-Semitism incidents. And, so that's an example. And I think we can use that, even though that's education related, to kind of look at how serious would Trump be about pulling funding from other elements of the country that he feels like aren't doing the right thing.
The last question for you here, Reagan. It's been quite the week, whether it's news related to illegal immigration or to tariffs, of course, who could forget about those, or related to these higher institutes of education. What's the sentiment like on the Hill, in the White House, in Washington, D.C., really, regarding all of these big changes happening?
Yeah, I definitely think it's been busy. Maybe it's been a little tense. I think President Trump kind of admitted it himself. He decided to pause the tariffs, he said, because people were getting yippy. And so, you know, there is definitely maybe a little bit of anxiety, but that is exactly, I think, what Trump's voters want. They want to see, you know, the institution get a little uncomfortable, and they want to see Trump make these decisions that are going to kind of frustrate the people that you consider swamp creatures. And so, you know, I think with the tariffs and how people handle their anxiety towards the issue is really going to be mapped out in the next 90 days when we see how many deals the Trump administration can strike with these 75 countries that came to the table.
Yeah, and Karoline Leavitt just said there's already 15 offers on the table. We'll see what comes out in the next 3 months. Reagan Reese, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And up next, France's Minister of Education has announced that secondary school students will soon be required to surrender their mobile phones before entering school. That story and more after this break.
What has lasted 5,000 years was once almost lost. Now, the world awaits the divine culture's return.
Supermodel Cindy Crawford doesn't just walk the red carpet, she rocks it. At 58, she steals the show and wows the press. Hollywood Life exclaims, Cindy Crawford has never lost her stunning glow. While Page 6 raves, she's still as gorgeous as ever. What is Cindy's secret? It's meaningful beauty. And now with new advanced formulas, it's better than ever. Watch as the appearance of lines and wrinkles are diminished in just weeks. It's no wonder everyone's talking about meaningful beauty.
My makeup artist said, your skin has been looking great lately. What products are you using? And I said, I'm using Meaningful Beauty. And she said, really? I've tried Meaningful Beauty before. I love those products. And then the other lady down in the trailer said, I use Meaningful Beauty. I love it.
Our new and improved formulas deliver age-defying ingredients even deeper into the skin where wrinkles begin. And this brand new offer is Cindy's most exciting ever. Because when you order, you'll get Cindy's exclusive Super Brightening Duo, a $120 value absolutely free. First, you'll get 60 of our Revive and Brighten eye masks, the celebrity secret that visibly smooths, awakens, and restores the area around your eyes. Next, discover the power of our Vitamin C Biphase Brightening Oil for an immediate boost of glamour and glow.
I'm not ashamed to say I am 53 years old. Thank you, Cindy.
The total effect of this free gift package? A red carpet ready complexion. Get all this, a $300 value for just $49.95. But you must act quickly. Results guaranteed or your money back.
So make the call or go online now and put yourself on the path to the most beautiful skin of your life. Trust me, it's worth it.
This special offer is not available anywhere else, so don't delay. Scan the code, go to meaningfulbeauty.com, or call the number on your screen now.
Kids love it. Parents trust it. Obviously. Explore GJW Plus Kids Series and Ganjian Campus courses led by expert educators. This is spectacular. Children will learn values like respect, responsibility, and knowledge in language, science, and more. Wow. All while having fun. Perfect. Subscribe today at GJW Plus Kids, where learning meets fun.
Thanks for staying with us. Lawmakers on both sides of the aisle set the tone for the next step in the reconciliation process. Republicans are hoping to have a bill that unlocks President Trump's agenda passed by Memorial Day. Our Washington correspondent Luis Martinez reports.
We have made it explicitly clear to the Speaker and our leadership that we want to protect Medicaid for the vulnerable individuals, low-income seniors, people with disabilities, children, those that actually need Medicaid. We want to protect.
House Republicans who voted in favor of the budget resolution this Thursday warned House Republican leadership that they would not vote for a final reconciliation bill that cuts Medicaid benefits to eligible recipients, while Democrats are demanding that the spending cuts spare federal workers.
I don't take for granted the people who dedicated their lives to don the uniform to serve our country. We have to continue to protect them and watch out for them. Those who work in our federal government and want to serve in wearing a different uniform, we got to watch out for them as well.
Come back to the table, negotiate with Congress, work with Democrats on behalf of the American people. Because in this election, as much as we talk about, or the Republicans talk about a mandate, 50% of Americans voted for someone else.
The chairman of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, Congressman Greg Casar, continued his attacks on Elon Musk, while House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries accused House Republicans of market manipulation.
In his 80 days in power, Elon Musk has fired more veterans from the federal government than anyone else in history. Elon Musk called Social Security a Ponzi scheme, tried to shut down the phone lines that seniors use to get their checks.
We need to get to the bottom of the possible stock manipulation that is unfolding before the American people, including what, if any, advanced knowledge did members of the House Republican Conference have of Trump's decision to pause the reckless tariffs that he put into place.
Of the $1.5 trillion in spending cuts that the budget resolution instructs House committees to find, the House Commerce and Energy Committee has been instructed to find $800 billion in spending cuts. House Republicans remain committed to cutting waste, fraud, and abuse to reach this goal. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Luis Eduardo Martinez, NTD News.
And now we turn to the National Transportation Safety Board, which is holding a briefing on yesterday's fatal helicopter crash in the Hudson River just outside of New York City. All 6 people on board that flight were killed, including a family of 5. Let's tune in.
I also want to start by thanking the first responders. This was a tremendous effort. And I want to thank specifically, first and foremost, the mayor for allowing us to be here in City Hall and do this press conference, and for all the support that you've given us and the team. I also want to thank the Jersey City Office of Emergency Management, the Jersey City Police Department, Jersey City Fire, Jersey City EMS, Port Authority of New York and New Jersey Police Department, the New Jersey Park Police, the New Jersey Transit Police Department, Hudson County Office of Emergency Management, the NYPD Special Operations, FDNY Special Operations, New York City Office of Emergency Management, the United States Coast Guard, the Army Corps of Engineers, and so many others that we will continue to mention in our follow-up press briefings. Now, I want to set expectations for this press conference. This crash occurred yesterday at about 3:15 p.m., so we're not even 24 hours later. Rightfully, the focus yesterday was on, first and foremost, victim recovery, and then wreckage recovery. Our investigators, the NTSB, we stay out of the way when victim recovery efforts are in process. That is first and foremost, most important. Our investigation can always wait. Once that was done, we had Luke Chiata, who is our chief of our Eastern region, who lives right here in New York, on scene as part of the wreckage recovery operations. And those two were the focus for yesterday. The rest of the team began to arrive late last night, including me, and early this morning. So that means this is the first full day of our investigation. And as you can see, our investigators are out doing some of the work that I'm about to talk about in just a second. But as far as information sharing today, I am not going to share a lot of investigative information. We have a lot of information, but we do not speculate. We need to confirm information. That is a process that takes time. So I will say, I understand that you have a lot of questions, and we will attempt to answer them over the coming days. A little bit about our team and our process. We have 17 people who are here on scene. That includes 10 investigators. They are supported by a minimum of 10 experts back in our headquarters in Washington, D.C. The on-scene specialists, they are experts, and they have the following specialties. Operations, they'll focus on the helicopter operator. They'll look at the owner of the helicopter itself, and they will look at pilot qualifications and other information. We have experts on helicopter airworthiness, on structures, and on systems. We also have our evidence management team here, as well as our transportation disaster assistance team, which is responsible for working with the family to get them the assistance they need throughout the course of the investigation, not just here on scene, but in the coming days, weeks, and months throughout the investigation to the issuance of our final report, and sometimes for months and years beyond. The wreckage exam began this morning. Our team, I was there, our team began pulling components and the engine off the wreckage and other components that they would like to more closely examine. Most of their focus was to turn it upright and move the helicopter or the wreckage inside so that they can begin to do a more comprehensive examination and get to the other side of the wreckage that was against the pavement. We also are aware that there are dive teams. The New York Police Department is still diving for components and pieces of the helicopter that we are still looking to recover. Those include the main rotor, the main transmission, the roof structure, and the tail structure, and we appreciate all of their hard work. And then we have a whole team that is collecting the standard information that we normally gather as part of any investigation, which includes pilot qualifications, logbooks, history of the helicopter, maintenance logs, and so forth. We do have the logbooks for the pilot. The pilot held a commercial pilot certificate with rotorcraft and instrument ratings. The pilot reported 450 hours of total flight experience on his most recent medical, which was issued on September 20th, 2024. As of March 29th, 2025, the pilot accumulated about 788 hours of total flight time. We still need to calculate flight time in that Bell helicopter, and I'll have more information on that hopefully tomorrow, because he previously was flying a Robinson 44. Now, what we are hoping is that we are able to get the public to send us any photos or video you may have, or if you want to contact us because you believe that you have information that could be pertinent to our investigation, please reach out to us, provide that information to us. We will get in contact with you at the following email address: witness@ntsb.gov. That's witness@ntsb.gov. Now, I will take some questions Again, a reminder, I know there will be questions for very detailed investigative information. I am happy to talk about the team, their qualifications, the process. I am not going to speculate on investigative information. We are very factual, and we will provide that in due course. So I will call on you. Please state your name, your affiliation for me.
It's Matthew Chase at Newsday. To the extent you're able to share this, is there a preliminary cause? I realize you gave that early talk. Is there a cause preliminarily that you can share with us?
The question is there a preliminary cause? We do not have a preliminary cause. That takes time. As I stated, our team focused on helicopter airworthiness and structures and systems is at the facility with the wreckage, doing the wreckage exam. That takes time. Of course, it takes time to also gather information, records that we need to comb through. So we do not have that at this time. And just to mention, as regarding cause, we will not speculate on cause ever, but we will not be determining any sort of preliminary or probable cause at the scene of an accident. We don't do that. What we are doing here is gathering the perishable evidence, the evidence that we need to gather for our investigation. When it comes to maintenance logbooks and other materials, we can look at those materials later on. What we need to do is look at the wreckage now. We need to focus on finding some of the additional components and structures that we're looking for, conduct witness interviews, and gather the records that we need. We can review the records later, so that probable cause will not occur for quite some time. Yes, ma'am, and then we'll go here. So the question was what we were doing with the engine. Nothing that we would not normally do as part of our standard investigation, where we would have wreckage and we'd start separating some of the components that we always look at. That's standard in our investigation. Of course, we'll have a team that always looks at engines or power plants to evaluate them as in standard course of our investigation. So nothing in particular. It was in the wreckage, and so we separated it from the helicopter so we could take a closer look at it in a more upright position. Yes, sir.
Broadly speaking, what do you think the physical evidence will tell you about what caused this crash? And then also, this particular company had a couple of serious incidents in the last several years. Do you think that will be relevant to your investigation?
The question is, what will us looking at as part of this investigation on scene tell us about cause, and what will we be looking at related to the safety history as part for this particular helicopter company? First of all, we always look at safety history. That's a standard part of all of our investigations, so we'll collect that, not just from the Federal Aviation Administration, that is a party to every single one of our investigations, but we'll also ask those questions in interviews and get other information that will help us get a very broad view and detailed information about the safety history of this particular operator and also the owner of the helicopter itself. With respect to what will it tell us on scene about our investigation, the evidence right now, everything is on the table. We don't rule anything out. We take a very detailed and comprehensive view, and it's way too early in the investigation. It will be too early on scene. That's much later in the investigation. Yes, ma'am. The question is, what have we been able to glean from the videos that are already circulating on social media. Those are very helpful for our investigators, certainly, but a lot of those videos are from a very far distance, and so we'll have to look at those a little bit further back at headquarters, but we're hoping to get some additional videos that provide us information. We don't know what people have recorded or taken pictures of that could be helpful in an investigation. We have found in past investigations, and I'm just thinking of one that I went to in Ketchikan, Alaska, a mid-air collision where photos from somebody who was on board one of the airplanes helped us significantly in our investigation. So it can be very key parts of our investigation. So for anyone who didn't hear my previous request, please send us any sort of videos or photos or information you'd like to share with us at witness@ntsb.gov. Yes, ma'am.
I know when you do these investigations, you also come out with recommendations. I mean, knowing the history of these crashes so far, are there any thoughts that you have in terms of regulating this industry even before looking at this particular crash, just based on the amount of crashes that are taking place with these sightseeing helicopters in general? There's a lot of debate on whether they should operate at all.
So the question is, do we have any sort of concerns or have we issued any sort of safety recommendations in the past about these type of air tour operations? We have. Actually, we did. So this particular operator was governed under Part 135 of the Federal Aviation Regulations, but this particular operation was under Part 91. All air tours are. We have issued an entire report on Part 91 operations with respect to revenue passengers. We believe in one level of safety strongly, and that may not look like regulation for a major commercial airline, but we do believe that they should be regulated. We have issued recommendations in the past on recorders, crash-resistant recorders.
A live look there at NTSB Chair Jennifer Homendy speaking on that deadly helicopter crash in the Hudson River just yesterday. We are less than 24 hours since that crash happened. Still a lot left to be uncovered. The past 24 hours have really been focused on victim and wreckage recovery. Still nothing yet about potential causes. The NTSB is asking for anyone with any footage or photographs of the incident to send them over. Now, for more on this news, you can go visit ntd.com/live for more. Coming up, the Defense Department announcing billions of dollars in spending cuts as a result of DOJ's efforts at the Pentagon. We'll have that story and more in the next hour. Stay with us.
Hi friends, Richard Karn here. Now I'm known as the guy who can fix just about anything, but the technology in most appliances requires very special training to fix. My point is, even I know when I've met my match, and that's why my family has Choice Home Warranty. So we won't get stuck with high-priced repairs.
Choice Home Warranty covers over 25 major home systems and appliances. That's your AC, heating, plumbing, kitchen and laundry appliances, and so much more.
Imagine for less than a cup of coffee a day, Choice Home Warranty can help protect you from expensive major system and appliance breakdowns that your homeowner's insurance doesn't cover. But you have to call now before it's too late.
Every homeowner should have Choice Home Warranty. Your homeowner's insurance is not going to cover your appliances.
Washing machine, dryer, refrigerator, air condition. If I had any issues arise, they were able to take care of it immediately.
Now, homeowner's insurance won't protect you when your home's major systems and appliances break down due to normal wear and tear. But Choice Home Warranty will. They can help cover repairs and replacements.
Choice Home Warranty is the best warranty we've ever used. It would save you so much money in the long run.
Hey, I'm not the only one raving about Choice Home Warranty. They were named a Best Home Warranty Company and Best Claim Service by U.S. News 360 Reviews.
Call Choice Home Warranty now and get access to a nationwide network of over 15,000 technicians and the latest appointment setting technology so you'll know when they're on their way.
If I have an issue with an appliance or something around the house, I just call up Choice Home Warranty and I don't have to worry about that.
So, Do what this old DIYer did and call Choice Home Warranty now before something breaks down. Tell them I sent you and get your first month free.
Call Choice Home Warranty before it's too late and get protection for your heating, AC, plumbing, kitchen, and laundry appliances, and more. Call for your free quote today. Call in the next 5 minutes and get your first month free. 800-360-6782. 800-360-6782.
You're so right for me, and I'm right for you. I love the things you do, like sweet tasting wine. Your lips are so divine. Your loving turns me on. My lonely days are gone. That's why I'm never gonna let you go. Never gonna let you go, babe. I'm never gonna let you go. No, no, never gonna let you go.
Here you go.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome to NTD Newsroom. I'm Fiona G. Beijing will be increasing tariffs on U.S. imports from 84% to 125%. This in retaliation against the U.S.'s decision to hike China duties to a total of 145%. The White House says retaliation would not be good for China. And the Trump administration is asking a federal judge to pause a lawsuit against the U.S. Air Force Academy, which accuses it of race-based admissions. The administration says the school has changed its policy. The Trump administration reaches an agreement with 6 major American law firms. The firms agreed to donate $600 million worth of legal services to the U.S. Our guest explains it all. The National Transportation Safety Board is investigating the helicopter crash in the Hudson River that has killed the pilot and a family of 5. We'll have the latest. The Defense Department announces billions of dollars in spending cuts as a result of DOJ's efforts at the Pentagon.
This is NTD Newsroom, live from our global headquarters in New York City.
Starting off this hour with the latest in this tit-for-tat battle between the world's 2 largest economies, China has raised tariffs on U.S. goods to 125%. Now, Chinese leader Xi Jinping made his first public comments on the escalating trade war, saying in a statement today that China is not afraid. Beijing said the new import rules will be enforced beginning tomorrow. China has indicated that it does not intend to go higher than 125%, saying that it would be meaningless to engage in further escalation. It comes after President Trump raised tariffs on China to 145%. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent previously criticized China for its retaliatory tariffs, saying it would ultimately hurt China more. He noted that China's exports to the United States are 5 times greater than those of the U.S. to China. Now, on Wednesday, Trump paused his latest round of tariffs for 90 days for all countries except China. White House officials say the president is waiting for Beijing to break the impasse, but Beijing has repeatedly refused to arrange a leader-level phone call. Xi Jinping has instead launched a week of high-stakes diplomacy with other trade partners. U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer said that he'll be speaking to his Taiwanese and Israeli counterparts today. He confirmed this during an interview on Fox News.
Right after I'm done with this TV spot, I'm going to be speaking with my counterpart in Israel. Over the last 2 days, I had a long discussion with the Vietnamese. We're speaking with the Taiwanese later today as well. I have a full dance card.
Greer said he was speaking with multiple countries. That's after President Trump said yesterday that he would temporarily lower the tariffs on dozens of countries. Greer stressed the importance of the United States diversifying its imports to make it less dependent on Chinese goods. He also added, quote, "We do import a lot from China, and that actually, to me, underscores the urgency of the situation." Greer was asked this morning to respond to Chinese regime leader Xi Jinping's remarks.
I'm not going to further comment this morning. Thank you, though.
Is the U.S. engaged in negotiations with China?
Not at this point.
The European Union and China have agreed to look into setting minimum prices for Chinese-made electric vehicles instead of tariffs imposed by the EU last year. A European Commission spokesperson said yesterday that the EU Trade Commissioner spoke with China's Commerce Minister. Both sides agreed to look into setting minimum prices. That's what the spokesperson had to say. Now, China's Commerce Ministry said in a statement that negotiations were set to start immediately. Previous minimum price deals agreed to by the EU have been for simple commodities rather than complex products such as cars. The EU increased tariffs on Chinese-built EVs to as much as 45% last October. The EU spokesperson also added that the next meeting between European and Chinese officials is expected to be held in Beijing in July. White House Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt spoke to reporters today as President Donald Trump undergoes his annual physical at Walter Reed Medical Center. Leavitt kicked off the press conference with details about the recent release of Russian-American ballerina Ksenia Karelina.
Last night, Ksenia Karelina arrived back safely in the United States after being detained in Russia for more than a year. Since Inauguration Day, President Trump and his team have secured the release of more than 40 detained Americans abroad. This is more than half of the number of Americans released by Joe Biden in 4 years. And President Trump has brought these Americans home in 80 days. This administration will continue to work hard to bring Americans home from around the world.
Leavitt also touted positive economic news, citing a 2.4% drop in the consumer price index. The White House press secretary reported drops in prescription drug prices, airfare, and car insurance as well. Leavitt also promoted President Trump's economic agenda, specifically here, his trade and tariff strategy.
On that note, more than 75 countries have now reached out to the Trump administration, eager to address the trade issues that have exploited America and hurt our workers in the process. The phones have been ringing off the hook to make deals, and these countries wisely heeded President Trump's warning not to retaliate, and as a result, they were rewarded with a 90-day pause and substantially lower reciprocal tariff rates during this period so potential solutions can be achieved. Past presidents just willingly accepted the failed status quo on trade that ripped off our workers and our companies. But that's not who this president is. He creates his own leverage and negotiates deals better than anyone else who has sat in the Oval Office before him. And that process is currently underway.
Now, Leavitt also focused on China, which remains in a tariff standoff with the United States. The White House press secretary said a deal still remains possible here.
President Trump has said China wants to make a deal on tariffs. The president says he has a great relationship with Chinese President Xi. He's willing to speak with him directly. Why doesn't the president just pick up the phone and get this ball going?
All of the things the president just said are true. The president, as I said from the podium just a few days ago when I was up here, would be gracious if China intends to make a deal with the United States. If China continues to retaliate, it's not good for China. The United States of America is the strongest, best economy in the world, as evidenced by the more than 75 countries who have called the administration immediately to cut good deals. So the president wants to do what's right for the American people. He wants to see fair trade practices around the globe, and that's his intention and his goal.
So is he waiting for China to make the first move here?
I'm not going to comment on communications that are happening or may not be happening, or either way. We'll leave it to our national security team to get these discussions underway. And as always, in the effort of transparency, we will provide updates moving forward. But the president has made it very clear he's open to a deal with China.
Why is he optimistic that China's going to make a deal or wants to make a deal if they're not talking? Where's that optimism come from?
He's optimistic.
Hey, why would any of our allies work with us to isolate China in a trade war if we're treating friend and foe alike?
You'll have to talk to our allies who are reaching out to us. The phones are ringing off of the hooks. They've made it very clear they need the United States of America. They need our markets. They need our consumer base.
The Trump administration today announced a change in the U.S. Air Force Academy's admissions policy. Race will no longer be a factor in its application review. This is what it had to say in a court filing. NTD's Arlene Richards has more.
The Department of Justice on Friday asked a federal judge to pause a lawsuit against the U.S. Air Force Academy. The lawsuit filed in December accused the Academy of unconstitutional race-based admissions. Now, the Justice Department says the parties have agreed to put the case on hold while they discuss details of the Academy's new policy. They say the litigation against the Academy could become moot. The military school had long used race to boost enrollment of Black, Hispanic, and other minorities. The plaintiffs, Students for Fair Admissions, were seeking to build upon a 2023 Supreme Court case it won against Harvard and the University of North Carolina. The highest court rendered those universities' race-conscious admissions policies unconstitutional. After the ruling, the group launched new lawsuits against the Air Force Academy, the U.S. Naval Academy, and the West Point Military Academy. The Biden administration supported the use of race as an admissions factor to prevent the appearance of distrust within the armed forces due to a scarcity of minority officers. But President Trump signed an executive order on January 27th ordering an end to diversity, equity, and inclusion practices within the military. The parties are continuing to discuss the details of the Academy's new policy and its effect on this lawsuit. Arlene Richards, NTD News.
A federal judge in Maryland today demanded the Trump administration identify the whereabouts of Kilmar Abrego Garcia, a Salvadoran national who was mistakenly sent to El Salvador back on March 15th. His attorney commented on the hearing at a press conference.
The government refused to provide any of those pieces of information that the judge ordered them to provide. Not only the information about what future steps they're planning to take, they even refused to answer the question about what they've done so far.
The government had stated in a filing that it needed a, quote, meaningful opportunity to review the Supreme Court's decision. Yesterday evening, the High Court confirmed a district court ruling which had required the administration to take steps to return Abrego Garcia from a Salvadoran prison. The district court asked DOJ to provide information about those steps by 11:30 this morning. The government's attorney argued the time was too short and requested an extension until Tuesday, April 15th. Here, citing sensitive country-specific considerations. When we come back, the Trump administration brokers a deal with 6 major American law firms. The firms had been under investigation for discrimination practices. And the Defense Department announces billions of dollars in spending cuts as a result of DOJ's efforts at the Pentagon. That and more after the break.
What has lasted 5,000 years was once almost lost. Now, the world awaits the divine culture's return.
At Mathis Home, we understand that your home is a reflection of you. And during our spring style event, we have fresh new looks that are waiting to make your home look and feel great at the lowest prices. And with all the latest styles in bloom, you'll find savings in every department. Whether it's a clean and modern sectional or a rustic and traditional dining table, we have it in stock with fast and free delivery. Come find the look that's right for you at our spring style event at your furniture superstore, Mathis Home.
I'm Jonathan Lawson. If you're 50 to 85, please listen closely. The lock I want to talk to you about isn't the one on your door. It's a rate lock for your life insurance that guarantees that once you're insured, your rate can never go up at any time for any reason. Many policies you see don't have one, but you can get a lifetime rate lock from Colonial Penn. This plan was designed for people on a fixed income with coverage options that start at $9.95 a month. That's less than 35 cents a day. Your rate is locked in for life. Coverage can never be canceled, and your acceptance is guaranteed. You cannot be turned down because of your health. See for yourself. Call for an information kit and gift. Both are free with no obligation.
Call 1-800-624-6556 for your free information and your free gift. That's 1-800-624-6556. 1-800-624-6556. Call now.
My 15-year-old son, Ethan, and I had a fun and relaxing morning. We returned home, and Ethan walked to his best friend's house an hour later. I heard the ambulance scream by the street, carrying my beautiful boy. Ethan was shot in the head in his best friend's house with an unsecured gun. He had 0 chance of survival. The father, the gun owner, he stored his 3 guns and bullets in a shoebox.
How do you feel?
That has to be the most horrific experience that a human could ever have.
David, would you give any advice?
First thing you do is not keep your ammunition with your weapons, and that your weapons need to be locked at all times.
Welcome back. Lawmakers on both sides of the aisle set the tone for the next step in the reconciliation process. Republicans are hoping to have a bill that unlocks President Trump's agenda to be passed by Memorial Day. Our Washington correspondent Luis Martinez has more on this story.
We have made it explicitly clear to the Speaker and our leadership that we want to protect Medicaid for the vulnerable individuals, low-income seniors, people with disabilities, children, those that actually need Medicaid. We want to protect.
House Republicans who voted in favor of the budget resolution this Thursday warned House Republican leadership that they would not vote for a final reconciliation bill that cuts Medicaid benefits to eligible recipients, while Democrats are demanding that the spending cuts spare federal workers.
And I'll take for granted the people who dedicated their lives to don the uniform to serve our country. We have to continue to protect them and watch out for them. Those who work in our federal government and want to serve in wearing a different uniform, we got to watch out for them as well.
Come back to the table, negotiate with Congress, work with Democrats on behalf of the American people. Because in this election, as much as we talk about, or the Republicans talk about a mandate, 50% of Americans voted for someone else.
The chairman of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, Congressman Greg Casar, continued his attacks on Elon Musk, while House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries accused House Republicans of market manipulation.
In his 80 days in power, Elon Musk has fired more veterans from the federal government than anyone else in history. Elon Musk called Social Security a Ponzi scheme, tried to shut down the phone lines that seniors use to get their checks.
We need to get to the bottom of the possible stock manipulation that is unfolding before the American people, including what, if any, advanced knowledge did members of the House Republican Conference have of Trump's decision to pause the reckless tariffs that he put into place.
Of the $1.5 trillion in spending cuts that the budget resolution instructs House committees to find, the House Commerce and Energy Committee has been instructed to find $800 billion in spending cuts. House Republicans remain committed to cutting waste, fraud, and abuse to reach this goal. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Luis Eduardo Martinez, NTD News.
Keeping our eye out on tariffs, White House Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt said today that 15 offers are already on the table for the U.S., although no details on exactly what or who those deals are for. Now, China, meanwhile, upping its retaliatory tariffs to 125%, though the regime said that it wouldn't go higher than that. The press secretary saying that President Donald Trump would be gracious if China were to come forward for talks, and that retaliation would be no good for China. And joining us now is Richard Stern, Director of Budget Policy at the Heritage Foundation and former budget advisor to House Speaker Mike Johnson. Richard, thank you so much for being on here with us today. Let's start with the bigger picture here, right? Away from China, just a big picture at the tariffs. This strategy from the president has faced an onslaught of criticism from economists of all schools of thought, but you've been supportive from the outset. Why?
Well, because we see it as a negotiation tool to be able to remove foreign barriers abroad, which obviously we've got 75 countries that have reached out to the president for a deal, 15, as you talked about, where there seems to be a deal in the process. And so I think that's the major dynamic here, is that a lot of economists have talked about it as tariffs as permanent policy versus using tariffs as a way to negotiate lower barriers. And then the other side of that, of course, is the president has talked about the importance of being able to use tariff revenues as a way of offsetting other much more harmful taxes that the U.S. already imposes. So, a lot of the nuance is lost in the conversation, but that's the way in which I and the Heritage Foundation are looking at this as a positive road forward.
We'll go deeper on this nuance here. What exactly are you and the Heritage Foundation seeing that other economists didn't see or still aren't seeing?
Well, again, I think they would agree that there are these trade barriers that other countries impose on Americans. The disagreement here is about what the best way is to try to remove those. So I think the president has showed here a command of tariffs as a way to bring these countries to the negotiating table. And the truth is, a lot of the people you're talking about didn't think he would get them to the table, and he's got 75 of them at the negotiating table. So in that regard, we've seen the value of using these as a hardball negotiation tactic. The other thing I should say as well is there is a debate within the tax policy world about the way the U.S. tax system disadvantages American producers on the global stage. And that's one of those debates that it's a lot of the tax policy people in the background are having that debate. But the original person that actually tried to fix this problem in Congress was Speaker Paul Ryan in the original tax bill. And so this is a debate that's been going around since then. But a lot of economists agree that we need to border or adjust our taxes to get rid of this decades-long imbalance. So there isn't unity on that one about what the right way to deal with it is.
Well, tell us more about your reaction here. When you first heard the president was going to implement these Liberation Day tariffs, what were you expecting to happen, and has it played out so far the way you were expecting?
Sure. So there's one part of it that did not play out the way we were expecting, but that gets to what the president did. So what we were expecting, what he had promised, of course, was reciprocal tariffs in the sense that matching tariffs on our end to tariffs on their end, again, as a negotiating tactic to get them to withdraw their barriers of trade. Unfortunately, the White House didn't deliver on that. What the White House delivered on were tariffs that were set against the size of the trade deficit. Now, what I would tell you, what any economist would tell you, is that the trade deficit is not a problem. In fact, often it's a good thing, but that gets into the particulars of what the trade deficit is and how it works. So, in that regard, the tariffs that the Trump assigned were not, in fact, actually the tariffs that he had talked about doing. They were not truly reciprocal tariffs. So, in that regard, and frankly, stock markets weren't pricing in that much of a decline when they thought they were going to be truly reciprocal. The stock market only started falling once there was a realization that the tariffs in place did not have to deal with reciprocality. So again, what we have pitched, and Dr. Kevin Roberts of the Heritage Foundation and I put out an op-ed yesterday, again calling for a commitment to truly reciprocal tariffs meant to deal with these foreign trade practices.
Well, there's also a lot of discussion here about why exactly the president halted the tariffs to all countries except for China for 90 days. So one view here is that Trump changed course because of the pressure from the stock market drop and the selling of bonds. The other side we're hearing is that this was Trump's plan all along. What's your assessment to that?
Well, it's a little hard to know. I mean, again, to be fair, the stock and bond markets were going a little sideways on the president. But again, I would bring it back to they were going sideways on him because of the tariffs that were not reciprocal. And it's because of those tariffs that were not reciprocal, of course, that you had that issue within the stock and bond market. So again, I think the president's intention was always to use the reciprocal tariffs. And if he had committed to just those, then I think you would have seen a lot more of the hardball politics. But to be fair, what he did was sufficient to get 75 countries to the negotiating table. So it's a win-win, though perhaps not exactly the perfect strategy.
Now, going a little deeper on China here, I want to get your reaction to this news. We're hearing that China's upping its retaliatory tariff to 125%, but saying that they're not going to go any higher than that, or at least that's what they're indicating right now. Does that tell you anything at all regarding what's happening right now?
Well, what it tells you is, and we already knew this, the Chinese economy is predicated on bad debt, bad monetary policy, an enormous amount of supposed assets in China are government-produced, centrally planned economics, and so they don't really have the value that they say that they would. And so the Chinese economy has been sluggish. It has lacked growth. A full third of companies in China are underwater in terms of profitability. All of that was true prior to the tariffs being imposed. So I think what we can see with them retaliating but saying that they won't go further is they know that their economy is weak. They know that what they should really do is come to the table and work towards getting towards real free trade with the U.S. and not maintaining these barriers that they've had the whole way through. So I think this shows that this might actually be working to get them to get rid of those abusive practices. And again, I can't state enough that it is important that we try to remove Chinese influence from our economy as much as possible, in part because of all of the manipulative things that they do that really just deplete economic growth here and in China.
So would you say, as some analysts are saying, that this is really a first step in a global reordering of trade alliances?
Not quite. What I say is I think the world has been moving away from trading with China for a long time. I don't view it as a reordering. I view it as a continuation of the drive away from trade with China towards trade across free nations that trust each other, who are not military at odds with each other, who are not, as the Chinese government is doing, trying to induce countries into debt relationships with China that are lucrative only for the Chinese Communist Party. But again, I think beyond that, you've seen two different camps in the White House kind of warring over this. One, trying to use tariffs as a way to reduce the trade deficit, and then a different camp that want to use tariffs to negotiate to get these other wins, including dropping trade barriers abroad. So where I am, where the Heritage Foundation is on the latter side. We want to see a removal of these barriers, working towards a world of true free trade. We don't want to see a reordering of trade deficits, though.
All right, so Richard, right before we go here, give us a forecast. What do you expect is most likely going to happen in the next 90 days?
I think you're going to see markets recover a little bit, still be a little uncertain. I think within the next 90 days here, you're going to see a lot of agreements arranged between other countries in the United States. I think that you're going to see some movement between the U.S. and China. And then I think you're ultimately going to see the tariffs come off of all of those other trade partners as we get deals all across the board. What happens with China, I think, is harder to forecast because, frankly, it's hard to see the Chinese Communist Party ever just doing the right thing for their own people, as well, of course, ours. But I'll remain optimistic there.
And time will tell. Richard Stern, thank you for joining us. Happy Friday.
You too. Thank you for having me on. Always a pleasure.
And when we come back, the Defense Department announces billions of dollars in spending cuts as a result of DOJ's efforts at the Pentagon. We'll have that story and much more right after this break.
Food. It fuels our bodies, nourishes our spirits, and brings us together. Because we all need nutritious food to thrive.
Food gives me energy and it also helps me focus.
But not everyone knows where their next meal is coming from. And 1 in 7 people in America face hunger. It's tougher than ever for too many of us. But the simple truth is, ending hunger is possible, and it starts with you. Call or go online to helpfeedingamerica.org and give $19 a month, just 63 cents a day, to help families in your community facing hunger. Feeding America works from coast to coast with partner food banks, food pantries, and meal programs. Your monthly gift delivers food where it's needed most, puts fresh food on the table, and helps kids have healthy meals all year round, even when school is out.
You can see the difference with the kids when they're full. Food is everything.
Please call the number on your screen or go online to helpfeedingamerica.org. Give $19 a month. Your first gift can double an impact. And we'll send you this free canvas grocery bag as a reminder of how you're helping to end hunger for good.
When it comes down to it, it's about taking care of your family first and the loved ones that you need to provide for.
Food donations help me tremendously, and I'm very grateful for the food bank.
I have hope. The simple truth is, ending hunger in America is possible. You can help make it happen. The need is urgent. Call or go online now to helpfeedingamerica.org, and your gift can double in impact.
In 4 days. There was an old woman who lived in a shoe. She had so many children. She didn't know what to do.
Did you have a good day at school?
She gave them some broth. Without any bread.
There you go.
And kissed them all soundly.
Night night.
Good night. And put them to bed. Hunger is a story we can end. End it at feedingamerica.org.
Thanks for staying with us. The Department of Defense announces billions of dollars in savings from their DOGE efforts. NTD's correspondent Jason Blair joins us now from Washington, D.C. for an update. Jason, what have you got?
Hey, yeah, good to see you. Good to see you. So let's get into some DOGE updates here. So as you said, the DoD did announce a very big number in their savings for DOGE. Hegseth said that they have cut quite a bit of, quote, wasteful spending. He said most of it is coming from non-essential services like consulting and things like that. He did list a couple of examples in his announcement. Let's get into some of those and have a look.
DHA contracts for consulting services from Accenture, Deloitte, Booz Allen, and other firms. They're going to save the department $1.8 billion. How about a software reseller contract for enterprise cloud IT services, saving the department $1.4 billion.
So that's not all the news that Secretary Hegseth has. He did say that they cut some more funding to some more universities in addition to some that they announced recently, saving the department even more money. He did talk about that as well in his announcement. Have a look.
On top of that, in support of the president's priorities to stop federal funding for academic institutions that tolerate anti-Semitism and support divisive DEI programs, this week DoD is also pausing over $500 million in funding to Northwestern University and Cornell University, and that's on top of the $70 million in funding we've already paused at Columbia, Penn, Brown, and Princeton over the last few weeks.
And after all is said and done, Secretary Hegseth said the department has saved, with those additional funding cuts, up to almost $6 billion, and that is in the first 6 weeks of the department's DOGE's efforts. Back to you.
And Jason, do you know how DOGE, all in all, is coming along with government savings?
Yeah, Fiona, Elon Musk did talk about that on Thursday at the White House cabinet meeting. He announced that he's expecting at this point that DOGE will save the federal government $150 billion. That's about $900 per taxpayer. And let's go ahead and listen to a clip of him making that announcement on Thursday.
I'm excited to announce that we anticipate savings in FY26 from reduction of waste and fraud by $150 billion. And I mean, and some of it is just absurd, like people getting unemployment insurance who haven't been born yet. I mean, I think anyone can appreciate whether, I mean, come on, that's just crazy.
So back in March, Elon Musk did set the goal for DOGE to save the federal government $1 trillion. There were some questions on whether or not that number has changed. Reportedly, the White House did say that the $1 trillion goal is still in effect. So it's possible we might see this $150 billion estimation change as DOGE continues their efforts, or we might get some more clarity on those numbers soon. Back to you.
Jason Blair, thank you so much. And staying on the administration's goal of cutting spending, we're now going to bring on John Hart, CEO of nonprofit organization Open the Books. John, thank you so much for being here today. Now, you testified before the House DOGE subcommittee just a couple days ago on this topic of reducing specifically the federal real estate portfolio. Now, you had some really interesting numbers there. I'm just going to read a few of those numbers that you had mentioned. $4.6 billion on furniture from executive agencies since 2021, $237,000 in solar-powered picnic tables from the CDC bought during the COVID era, $700,000 on a single SEC conference room in New York. So go deeper here on your organization's findings with us. How far does this spending go?
Sure. Well, thanks for having me on. Look, the reason we have too much furniture in the federal government is really simple. We have too much government. We have too many agencies and too many buildings, and that has created a very high cost of having to decorate and redecorate this administrative state. So again, this project goes back 100 years where the progressive left intentionally wanted to create a managerial class to manage an increasingly complex economy back 100 years ago. And that has required the expansion of all these agencies so that we're spending about $1 billion a year just on furniture. And you know, you listed some of the more outlandish examples. We've spent $120,000 on recliners at our embassy in Islamabad, $700,000 for the conference room, the solar-powered picnic tables, $230,000, and those were purchased at a time when the tables themselves violated the CDC's social distancing guidelines. So this is literally a kitchen table issue for taxpayers because everyone in America can relate to the cost of furniture. And for the cost of that $4.6 billion, you could provide 9.2 million American families with a modest $500 kitchen table. So this is money that's coming out of the pockets of taxpayers, and they're asking hard questions about why we're spending so much on decorating these agencies.
Wow. Well, I'm curious here, has there been any finding that's been particularly surprising to you?
Well, I think the surprising finding is oftentimes the furniture gets, for example, when an office moves, instead of moving the furniture, they'll just get rid of all the furniture and buy new furniture when it would be a lot cheaper to just transport it. You know, particularly if it's a short distance. And so there's a problem in economics that Milton Friedman described. He actually described what's called the Friedman box, where there's 4 quadrants. And when you spend other people's money on other people, it is the least efficient way to spend money. The most efficient is when you spend your money on yourself. So you have all these perverse incentives in federal agencies because there's no incentive really for most federal employees to not spend extra money on furniture. And again, if to really get this problem, and I testified to this during the hearing, is that Congress needs to take a very hard look at the number of agencies we have. You're not going to meaningfully get rid of the buildings unless Congress reorganizes the federal agencies. And under the Constitution, there's really only 4 agencies that were described: Department of Defense, State, Justice, and Treasury. And you could add a Department of Interstate Commerce because Congress has the authority to regulate interstate commerce, and that could be a catch-all for other agencies. But there's no reason why we need this number of federal agencies. And you can shift a lot of this decision-making authority to state and local government. And there's no need to have it concentrated in Washington.
John, I think a quote that really stood out to me during your testimony was, "Every dollar saved in Washington is a dream realized somewhere in America."
That's right. Yeah, and that's, Thomas Jefferson and our founders, they understood, they were deeply immersed in political history. And the fundamental question for anyone in office is, what is the relationship between the government and the state? Thomas Jefferson said that the natural order of things is for liberty to diminish and for government to gain ground. So in other words, they understood that there's an entanglement between the size of the state and the size of the individual. And people living overseas in totalitarian systems, they don't need to be explained how that works. They feel it and they sense it every day. But the same forces of authoritarianism operate not just within kind of an axis of authoritarianism with nation states, but within our own borders. So politics is a forever war between freedom and tyranny. We want to tilt the scales to freedom. And that's why when you reduce the size of government, every dollar saved in Washington is a dream realized in America, because when you reduce federal agencies, you increase and empower the agency of the individual and their capacity to pursue happiness on their terms with their own resources.
John, when we're on this topic of recent cuts in savings, we also just heard that soundbite from Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth during Jason Blair's report on that $5.1 billion in cuts inside his department. So those cuts include everything from consulting fees, what he calls these duplicative IT services, DEI activities. Musk, at a cabinet meeting yesterday, also said that DOGE can, at this point, be estimated to save $150 billion in the fiscal year of 2026. How much more spending do you think can be cut without affecting essential government services here?
Well, I would challenge the assumption you can actually cut spending dramatically and improve the quality of services. So when I worked on the Hill for Senator Coburn, he was one of the most effective budget cutters in the past 50 years. We forced GAO to do an audit on all the duplication in the federal government. And their first finding was that there's about 100 or 200 billion dollars in duplication. But they actually wrote in the report that if you streamline and downsize agencies and these functions, you can improve the quality of services because you make it easier for people to get to access the service that they need. And it makes the government more efficient, more effective. So I would argue that if you cut more, you can actually improve the quality of services because you remove all the barriers and hindrances that people face when they're trying to interact with the government. And one of the best things DOJ has done, and they really need to build this case out more and explain it to the American people, is how antiquated and backwards our computer systems are. We're dealing with legacy software in a lot of agencies that's 20, 30, 40 years old or older. And all the federal retirement processing is done literally by hand with file cabinets in a mountain. It looks like a bunker. It's the craziest system where instead of digitizing these records, you have to go in and do it by hand. And so it makes it very difficult for employees to get their retirement and to move people through the system. And whether we want to have AI or not, we live in an era where we're going to have AI downsizing and reimagining of the workforce. I mean, that's the nature of technology. It's always a process of constructive disruption. You know, the switchboard operators were replaced long ago, but nobody wants to go back to the time when we had switchboard operators with telephones. And it's going to be the same thing with AI. It's going to be disruptive. It's going to be hard. But Elon Musk, and I give his team credit for forcing Congress to think about how are they going to operate and navigate this new world we have of artificial intelligence.
All right, John, before we go here, your organization, it places a heavy emphasis on government transparency. So from what you're seeing right now, how far or how close do you think the current administration is to the level of transparency that you want to be seeing?
Well, what I've suggested is when you look at our Constitution, the transparency provision is written into the Constitution before the First Amendment. So in other words, transparency is a first principle that comes before freedom of speech itself, because in the public square, transparency is like oxygen. You can't speak if you can't breathe. So what I would suggest they do, and I've written this up in the New York Post, is we need to have real-time transparency and give taxpayers the same level of access to the Treasury payment system that Elon Musk and the DOJ team enjoy right now. And if they do that, they're going to build more momentum for their case because everyone can then see and understand what they're looking at. So the system that we helped create when I worked in the Senate is the usaspending.gov, and that enabled Open the Books to do its work and a lot of other accounts online that are going through the federal checkbook. But there's a delay in that information. Whereas what Elon and his team have is now they essentially have real-time access, and you have to figure out how to give taxpayers that same access. Again, this is the same access they have to their own checkbook because it's their money, it's not the government's money. There's no reason to not give Americans visibility on that. And you can do it in a way that protects national security information and protects personal privacy. So I would encourage them to close that transparency gap between what they can see and what the rest of the country can see. Because if everyone could see what they see, their job would be much easier. I can guarantee it.
All right. Some very interesting points you're bringing up here today, John Hart. Thank you for joining us.
You bet. Thank you.
President Donald Trump has announced an agreement reached between his administration and 5 law firms. The firms were under investigation for potential discrimination violations. The deals outlined in a Truth Social post by Trump require the 5 firms to donate an aggregate of $600 million in mutually agreed upon legal services. They would also have to end discriminatory hiring practices and not deny clients based on political reasons. To shed light on this agreement, we sat down with civil rights attorney Bobby Ann Cox. Take a look.
Bobby Ann Cox, thank you so much for joining us. President Trump's post announcing this agreement between his administration and these law firms says the firms will not deny representation to clients because of the personal political views of individual lawyers. Do law firms really deny representation based on political views?
So it might not be that the law firms are doing that on purpose, in the sense that they're turning down business from one political idealism or the other. It might just be that they have gotten themselves into a situation where they consistently represent one political side, one political party, one political idealism. And so if they try to switch sides, they might be hit with this conflict that they have to avoid. Now, you can overcome a conflict of interest like this. Law firms can overcome this problem, but you have to have the consent of both sides. So you have to have the consent, written consent of your current client as well as the former client, so that both understand that you are representing each side. But law firms typically try and steer clear of that because you don't want to have ethical problems arise.
Why is the president taking executive action against these firms in the first place?
Well, I think what President Trump is doing here is trying to scale down on the probability or the possibility that he has people working against him inside his administration, which is what we saw happen in his first presidency, in his first term. So he has issued actually a few different executive orders against different big law firms here in the United States. And as a result of that, they have had their security clearance revoked, and that any contracts that the government has with them are being reviewed at this time. So I think this is an attempt by the president and his administration to make sure that those that are on his team and have access to inside information within the government are actually on his team, so to speak, and working towards the same goals.
Now, Bobby Ann, some firms like Sussman Godfrey, Perkins Coie, and Wilmer Hale are challenging Trump's executive action against them. How do you think these challenges will play out?
Generally speaking, if the president, the White House, specific agencies in the federal government want to have a specific law firm represent them with a certain matter, they have the right to choose which law firms they employ and which law firms they don't employ. So, having a security clearance revoked, having a contract canceled, as long as you're within the terms of the contract and you're not illegally breaching that contract, I don't think that these law firms really have a leg to stand on just arguing that they shouldn't continue to have a security clearance, particularly if their contract has been terminated, again, in a lawful manner, or if they're being replaced, so to speak, by other law firms that the White House or a specific agency would prefer to work with. So it will be interesting to see how the courts rule on this, but I don't think that the courts have the right to tell an agency or the administration or the president or the White House, which specific law firms they have to work with and which law firms should have security clearance and which law firms should not have security clearance. I do think that that is a decision that is wholly within the power of the president and the agencies that work beneath him.
Civil rights attorney Bobby Ann Cox, thank you again for your time.
Yes, thanks for having me, Chris.
And we're continuing our coverage of the tragic story coming out of Jersey City, New Jersey, where a helicopter crashed into the Hudson River and claimed the lives of all 6 people aboard, including a family of 5. The crash is now being investigated by the New York City Police Department, the Coast Guard, Army Corps of Engineers, and the National Transportation Safety Board. The victims were identified today. And we're going to stay on this story for more now. Let's go live back to Jersey City, where NTD's Chris Bobb is still on the scene. Chris, good to see you again. Tell us what you're seeing and hearing out there.
Sure. I'm right here at the site of the crash with the Hudson River. Just looking over the railing here, I see some of the headrest from the helicopter, as well as a small child's shoe. And I've been comparing the pictures that we saw earlier of one of the daughters in the helicopter with the shoe that I see out there. It's definitely the shoe. We just had a press conference in the Jersey City City Hall, and we heard from the chair of the NTSB. She gave some insights into the investigation that's underway here right now. They have 17 personnel on the scene investigating, 10 of whom are investigators. Let's look at what she says about the investigation. We have a clip of that.
Focus on the helicopter operator. They'll look at the owner of the helicopter itself, and they will look at pilot qualifications and other information. We have experts on helicopter airworthiness, on structures, and on systems. We also have our evidence management team here, as well as our transportation disaster assistance team.
So all of the wreckage was not recovered, as I just mentioned earlier with what's floating behind me, but all the victims were. We have some insights specifically into what the NYPD dive team and other groups are searching for right behind me in the Hudson. Let's go to that clip.
The New York Police Department is still diving for components and pieces of the helicopter that we are still looking to recover. Those include the main rotor, the main transmission, the roof structure, and the tail structure.
We also heard from Greg Kearse, who's with the New Jersey Office of Emergency Management. He's the director there, and he gave some pretty good insight into the challenges that investigators and divers are facing. Let's go to what he said about the visibility in the Hudson.
Hudson River is a very, very tough place to dive. So we're dealing with the expertise of the NYPD, and they're going to make sure it's done safely. And we're going to recover what's down there. It may take some time. But very, very murky. I mean, I was there last night when they were physically removing the victims. You literally can't see a hand in front of you, but they did a phenomenal job.
So Jennifer Hamandi said that we will gain insights into the investigation in the days to come, but a full report could be months to years away. Back to you.
Absolutely upsetting to hear about that shoe that you're seeing out there, Chris. Absolutely devastating news, but thank you for the update. Keep them coming. And up next, France's Minister of Education has announced that secondary school students will soon be required to surrender their mobile phones before entering school. That and more after this break. Don't go anywhere.
I'm Amy Grant, and I want to talk to you from my heart about the heart. I would have been the last person on the list to say this woman has a problem with her heart. So no, there was nothing about my life that said, you have a ticking time bomb in your chest. But I did. I wound up in the office of a cardiologist because I was there with my husband. And at the tail end of that, the cardiologist looked at me and said, I want to see you. No one was more surprised than I was to learn I was living with a rare heart condition. He said, Amy, this condition, you'll be fine, and then catastrophic. A few months later, I had open heart surgery that saved my life. And I owe it to the research and life-saving medical breakthroughs developed by the American Heart Association. That's why I'm asking you to join me and become a monthly donor to the American Heart Association. Please call now or go to helpheart.org. For only $19 a month, just 63 cents a day, you can help fund the next medical breakthrough, get the next person trained in CPR, and get the next hospital certified in high-quality cardiovascular care. If this could happen to me, it could happen to anybody. Heart disease is America's #1 killer, but your support can save your life or the life of someone you love. Give $19 a month with your credit card, and we'll send you this special t-shirt you can wear to show you're part of a community of monthly donors working to help save more lives like mine. I'm grateful for the American Heart Association. Their research gave me more time to do the things I love with the people I love. So listen to your heart. I'm here today because I did. Please call the number on your screen or go to helpheart.org now to become a monthly donor and help save even more lives. Thank you.
Every day, thousands of kids start vaping. And I can't let this happen to my kid. Of course, it's awkward to talk to your kids about the dangers of vaping. Hey, bestie, how sketch is me? It's hard to get their attention. Ready? Go. Yes, look at that. You even turn yours over. So if you want to talk to your kids about the dangers of vaping, you have to get it trending. Right, backpack kid?
Let's do it.
First, invite your kid to do the vape talk. Let's try this. All right.
Why is he here?
Yeah, I gotta get it trending, honey.
Come on.
Let's go.
Oh, honey, can we talk?
Yeah, what's up?
I see a lot of your friends vaping.
Visit talkaboutVaping.org for tips on when and how to have the vape talk.
Thanks for staying with us. In France, mobile phones will soon be banned in secondary schools. Officials say this decision follows a pilot program in 100 schools, which showed positive effects on learning outcomes. NTD's international correspondent David Vives reports from Paris.
Starting in September 2025, France will tighten its mobile phone ban in middle schools, requiring students aged 11 to 15 to part with their devices entirely during the school day. Phones will be stored in lockers, boxes or special locked pouches, accessible only when students leave school. France's Minister of Education said this is essential for the well-being and success of children at school, as well as for good relations between students and teachers. The minister's decision follows a successful pilot program in hundreds of schools last year. According to university professor Aude Denisot, there's a social pressure on teens to own mobile phones coming primarily from family and friends.
I don't really like to blame parents because I believe that they themselves are victims of this consumer society, which means that, for them, the norm is that when my son enters 6th grade, he needs a cell phone. So I'm going to buy one for him. Here, the watchword is freedom. Dare not to give your child a cell phone. Dare. There are parents who do it. It takes courage.
She also says that the use of computers and tablets in schools hinders children's ability to learn and should be limited.
We can see children who already spend an enormous amount of time on screens at home should still find a sanctuary at school. A sanctuary in which there's no digital at all, no telephone, but also no tablets and no computer.
A 2024 report commissioned by French President Emmanuel Macron recommended banning smartphones for children under 13 and restricting social media access until 18. David Vives, NTD News, Paris.
Coming up next, President Trump is poised to withhold federal funding from so-called sanctuary cities. This is part of an effort to bring down homicides. We'll have a data report on how much money is at stake here and the crime rates that are being targeted. We'll have that and more in the next hour. We'll be right back.
There's cultures that have been lost. But this culture hasn't been. The artist is showing us our sense of who we are, where we came from. You look at his hat. His hat is knitted probably by a man because a man traditionally knitted the hats. That hat tells you the story of who this person is, what his place in the culture is, the animals around him. Everything's all contained in the messages in the hat. And the tool that he's carrying over his shoulder. This is a centuries-old tool that has been able to rework the mountains. Those traditions are invaluable, and if we don't honor those traditions, then we're rootless. The artist is showing us the value of maintaining our culture and respecting our culture.
When I arrived in the U.S. at 19, I struggled to find job opportunities without a high school diploma. My name is Ariel, and my entire life changed when I took a chance and I got my high school diploma at age 22. Everything I have, my education, my career, my marriage, I owe to the Adult Literacy Center and my teachers. They were with me every step of the way, helping with my English and math, making sure I pushed through all the challenges. Oh my goodness.
So Ariel, we made this yearbook for you. It has notes from all the people that are here. Your achievement has set an example for so many students. Most importantly, your daughter.
Education was the key that unlocked all my opportunities.
When you graduate, they graduate. Visit finishyourdiploma.org to find free and supportive adult education centers near you.
Welcome to NTD Newsroom. I'm Chris Beards. Beijing will increase tariffs on U.S. imports from 84% to 125% in retaliation against the U.S. decision to hike China duties to a total of 145%. White House says retaliation is not good for China. The Trump administration is asking a federal judge to pause a lawsuit against the U.S. Air Force Academy, which accuses it of race-based admissions. The administration says the school has changed its policy. President Trump poised to withhold federal funding from so-called sanctuary cities. It's part of an effort to bring down homicides, a data report on how much money is at stake, and the crime rates being targeted. The National Transportation Safety Board is investigating the helicopter crash in the Hudson River that has killed the pilot and a family of 5. We have the latest.
This is NTD Newsroom, live from our global headquarters in New York City.
U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer said he will speak to his Taiwanese and Israeli counterparts today. He confirmed this during an interview with Fox News.
Right after I'm done with this TV spot, I'm going to be speaking with my counterpart in Israel. Over the last 2 days, I had a long discussion with the Vietnamese. We're speaking with the Taiwanese later today as well. I have a full dance card.
Greer said he was speaking with multiple countries. That's after Trump said yesterday he would temporarily lower the tariffs on dozens of countries. Greer stressed the importance of the United States diversifying its imports to make it less dependent on Chinese goods. He added, quote, "We do import a lot from China, and that actually, to me, underscores the urgency of the situation." Greer was asked this morning to respond to Chinese regime leader Xi Jinping's remarks.
I'm not going to further comment this morning. Thank you, though.
Is the U.S. engaged in negotiations with China?
Not at this point.
White House Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt spoke to reporters today as President Donald Trump undergoes his annual physical at Walter Reed Medical Center. Leavitt kicked off the press conference with details about the recent release of Russian-American ballerina Ksenia Karolina.
Last night, Ksenia Karolina arrived back safely in the United States after being detained in Russia for more than a year. Since Inauguration Day, President Trump and his team have secured the release of more than 40 detained Americans abroad. This is more than half of the number of Americans released by Joe Biden in 4 years. And President Trump has brought these Americans home in 80 days. This administration will continue to work hard to bring Americans home from around the world.
Leavitt also touted positive economic news, citing a 2.4% drop in the Consumer Price Index. The White House press secretary reported drops in prescription drug prices, airfare, and car insurance as well. Leavitt also promoted President Trump's economic agenda, specifically his trade and tariff strategy.
On that note, more than 75 countries have now reached out to the Trump administration, eager to address the trade issues that have exploited America and hurt our workers in the process. The phones have been ringing off the hook to make deals. And these countries wisely heeded President Trump's warning not to retaliate, and as a result, they were rewarded with a 90-day pause and substantially lower reciprocal tariff rates during this period so potential solutions can be achieved. Past presidents just willingly accepted the failed status quo on trade that ripped off our workers and our companies. But that's not who this president is. He creates his own leverage and negotiates deals better than anyone else who has sat in the Oval Office before him. And that process is currently underway.
Leavitt focused on China, which remains in a tariff standoff with the United States. The White House press secretary said a deal remains possible.
President Trump has said China wants to make a deal on tariffs. The president says he has a great relationship with Chinese President Xi. He's willing to speak with him directly. Why doesn't the president just pick up the phone and get this ball going?
All of the things the president just said are true. The president, as I said from the podium just a few days ago when I was up here, would be gracious if China intends to make a deal with the United States. If China continues to retaliate, it's not good for China. The United States of America is the strongest, best economy in the world, as evidenced by the more than 75 countries who have called the administration immediately to cut good deals. So the president wants to do what's right for the American people. He wants to see fair trade practices around the globe, and that's his intention and his goal.
So is he waiting for China to make the first move here?
I'm not going to comment on communications that are happening or may not be happening, or either way. We'll leave it to our national security team to get these discussions underway. And as always, in the effort of transparency, we will provide updates moving forward. But the president has made it very clear he's open to a deal with China.
Why is he optimistic that China's going to make a deal or wants to make a deal if they're not talking? Where's that optimism come from?
He's optimistic.
Hey, why would any of our allies work with us to isolate China in a trade war if we're treating friend and foe alike?
But you'll have to talk to our allies who are reaching out to us. The phones are ringing off of the hooks. They've made it very clear they need the United States of America. They need our markets. They need our consumer base.
A federal judge in Maryland today demanded the Trump administration identify the whereabouts of Kilmar Abrego Garcia, a Salvadorian national who was mistakenly sent to El Salvador on March 15th. His attorney commented on the hearing at a press conference.
The government refused to provide any of those pieces of information that the judge ordered them to provide. Not only the information about what future steps they're planning to take, they even refused to answer the question about what they've done so far.
The government had stated in a filing that it needed a meaningful opportunity to review the Supreme Court's decision. Yesterday evening, the High Court confirmed a district court ruling which required the administration to take steps to return Abrego Garcia from a Salvadorian prison. The district court asked the DOJ to provide information about those steps by 11:30 this morning. The government's attorney argued the time was too short and requested an extension until Tuesday, April 15th, citing sensitive country-specific considerations. Next, we have breaking news. A Louisiana immigration judge rules that Columbia University activist Mahmoud Khalil can be removed for violating the terms of his green card by engaging in anti-Jewish protesting and taking away the rights of others. Khalil has until April 23rd to appeal. The Trump administration today announced a change in the U.S. Air Force Academy's admission policy. Race will no longer be a factor in its application review. It said in a court filing, and NTD's Arlene Richard has more.
The Department of Justice on Friday asked a federal judge to pause a lawsuit against the U.S. Air Force Academy. The lawsuit filed in December accused the Academy of unconstitutional race-based admissions. Now, the Justice Department says the parties have agreed to put the case on hold while they discuss details of the Academy's new policy. They say the litigation against the Academy could become moot. The military school had long used race to boost enrollment of Black, Hispanic, and other minorities. The plaintiffs, Students for Fair Admissions, were seeking to build upon a 2023 Supreme Court case it won against Harvard and the University of North Carolina. The highest court rendered those universities' race-conscious admissions policies unconstitutional. After the ruling, the group launched new lawsuits against the Air Force Academy, the U.S. Naval Academy, and the West Point Military Academy. The Biden administration supported the use of race as an admissions factor. to prevent the appearance of distrust within the armed forces due to a scarcity of minority officers. But President Trump signed an executive order on January 27th ordering an end to diversity, equity, and inclusion practices within the military. The parties are continuing to discuss the details of the Academy's new policy and its effect on this lawsuit. Arlene Richards, NTD News.
When we come back, he became the new CEO of Intel last month, but findings show he invested in hundreds of Chinese companies, some with links to the Chinese military. I guess after the break.
Imagine a coffee that cares for your health. Expertly fermented with a 50 enzyme complex to enhance flavor and remove bitterness. Small batch roasted to a decadent medium dark, resulting in a brew that is gentle on digestion, low acid, and up to 90% less caffeine than regular coffee. Try America's first enzyme fermented coffee today.
What if you could whiten your teeth by simply brushing your teeth? Now you can with Smile Actives, the teeth whitening breakthrough that safely gets your teeth white and keeps them white every day, just by brushing your teeth.
I never thought that whitening my teeth could be so easy. I just put the gel on the brush, the toothpaste on it, brush, and I can see my white teeth.
Simply add Smile Actives to any toothpaste and our patented PolyClean technology activates into a powerful microfoam that penetrates into the enamel surface to safely lift and remove stains.
You need a simple way to whiten your teeth. Without strips, without trays, without going to the dentist. And it was about time that a product was developed that you would be able to do that with just brushing.
And now Smile Actives is even better with new Pro Whitening Gel with 33% greater whitening power, clinically shown to whiten teeth faster, up to 8 shades. 100% of users saw whiter teeth. On food stains, coffee and wine stains, even on veneers, crowns, and dentures.
I eat the blueberries, I drink the coffee, and I know that Smile Actives will keep my teeth white every day.
If you could use something so easy like Smile Actives to take yellow teeth to white teeth, why wouldn't you?
Why spend hundreds of dollars for whitening treatments at the dentist when now you can whiten your teeth with new Smile Actives Pro Whitening Gel every time you brush your teeth? Call or go to smileactives.com and for a limited time get new Pro Whitening Gel for just $24.95. Order in the next 5 minutes and buy one, get one absolutely free for just $24.95. That's 2 for 1 and save 58%. We'll even include free shipping. Get your teeth whiter guaranteed or return it within 60 days for your money back.
I smile every day now.
The difference is literally night and day.
So now I'm always smiling, always choosing, because now my teeth are much whiter.
This offer is not available in stores, so call or click now before the special buy one, get one free offer goes away.
When they learn something new and you can just see in their faces, it's such an incredible moment. It's those moments that are my favorite.
Now for the latest in a tit-for-tat battle between the world's two largest economies. China has raised tariffs on U.S. goods to 125%. Chinese regime leader Xi Jinping made the first public comment on the escalating trade war, saying in a statement today that China is quote, not afraid. Beijing said the new import rules will be enforced beginning tomorrow. China has indicated it does not intend to go higher than 125%, saying it would be meaningless to engage in further escalation. It comes after President Trump raised tariffs on China to 145%. U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent previously criticized China for its retaliatory tariffs, saying it would ultimately hurt China more. He noted that China's exports to the United States are 5 times greater than the U.S. exports to China. On Wednesday, Trump paused his latest round of tariffs for 90 days for all countries except China. White House officials say the president is waiting for Beijing to break the impasse, but Beijing has repeatedly refused to arrange a leader-level phone call. Xi Jinping has instead launched a week of high-stakes diplomacy with other trade partners. And corporate filings show the new CEO of Intel has invested in hundreds of Chinese tech firms, including at least 8 with links to the Chinese military. Lip Bu Tan became CEO of the U.S.'s largest chip maker last month. The findings have raised questions among some investors and complicates the issues of Intel's efforts to revive its business. Intel manufactures cutting-edge chips for the U.S. Department of Defense. Intel is also the only U.S.-based company making the most advanced computer chips in the world. But Tan controls more than 40 Chinese companies and funds, as well as having minority stakes in over 600 via investment firms he manages or owns. In many instances, he shares minority stake ownership with Chinese regime entities. Intel declined to comment on the matter. A spokesperson said Tan completed a questionnaire that requires disclosure of potential conflicts of interest. Next, Tesla has stopped taking orders for 2 imported US-made models on its Chinese website. They are Model S and Model X, but the Model 3 and Model Y are still listed. A key difference is those vehicles are made at Tesla's Gigafactory in Shanghai. They are much more popular in China, which is the world's largest car market. The S and X are mostly produced in the US and have always been niche vehicles in the Chinese market. Neither Tesla nor CEO Elon Musk must have commented on the matter. But it comes as China imposed new retaliatory tariffs on 125% on US imports. US tariffs on all Chinese goods have climbed to 145%. Investors hoping for an end to market swings are still waiting to see what comes next. The impacts to earnings, the economy, and equities are still being watched.
Donald Trump's move to postpone most of his new tariffs for 90 days seems to have brought only fleeting relief for markets. After a huge rally Thursday, Friday saw Asian stocks head lower again. Japan's Nikkei index closed down about 3%, while South Korea's benchmark Kospi index dropped about 0.5%. Markets in China fared better, however, with Hong Kong's Hang Seng index reversing early losses to gain 1% by mid-afternoon. That came amid reports of state funds stepping in to buy equities. The night before, Trump had indicated that he was open to negotiation.
What happens with China? We would love to be able to work a deal.
US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent also tried to offer hope, saying over 75 countries wanted to start talks. On Friday, the US and Vietnam agreed to begin formal negotiations. Meanwhile, media reports said Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba hoped to send a trade task force to Washington next week. But with Trump's total duties on China now at 145%, investors remain anxious that a global economic slowdown is coming. Investec economist Ellie Henderson says markets also remain concerned by the volatility of Washington policymaking.
We would far from say that uncertainty is over. We may have a brief pause for now with this 90-day pause on reciprocal tariffs, but it's still not clear what the end game is for Mr. Trump in terms of tariffs and how countries will negotiate. I think uncertainty is definitely here to stay, at least for the time being.
Such worries saw money flow into traditional safe havens, with the Swiss franc hitting 10-year highs against the dollar on Friday. Gold also saw gains. But US government bonds, normally also a safe haven, sold off again. That has raised concerns of deeper trouble in the financial system, with asset managers possibly forced to sell bonds to cover losses elsewhere.
U.S. port operators and shippers are calling on President Trump to back off on proposed port fees on Chinese vessels. His proposed plan to impose port fees of up to $3.5 million on China-linked commercial carriers could take effect as soon as April 17th. Under the proposal, ships operated by Chinese companies would be charged $1 million, while ships built in China would pay $1.5 million per port call. The proposal was heavily criticized by shipping and ports representatives. U.S. shippers say the fees would disproportionately harm American-owned carriers. U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer said earlier this week that not all port fees would be implemented. Gold prices breached the $3,200 level for the first time in history today. The move was fueled by a weaker dollar and an escalating trade war that sent investors rushing towards safe haven assets like gold. Bullion rose more than 1% to scale an all-time peak of almost $3,220 per ounce earlier in the session. It has gained around 5% this week. The dollar was down around 1% versus major peers today, which made it cheaper for overseas buyers to buy greenback-priced bullion. Tariffs have been a major driver of gold's appeal, but central bank demand, expectations of interest rate cuts by the Federal Reserve, and geopolitical instability has also fueled the metal's rally this year. Joining me now to discuss tariffs, markets, and the economy is Sam Burns, Chief Strategist at Mill Street Research. Sam, it's great to have you.
Thank you for having me.
Now, China is retaliating against President Trump's tariffs. It's raising its rate on U.S. imports by 41 points to 125%, while the U.S. rate is, of course, 145%. What does this escalation mean for global markets?
Well, I think it's clearly gotten to the point where tariffs this high are effectively almost a complete disruption or ending of trade between China and the U.S. Almost no business can possibly pay tariffs, of over 100%. So at this point, no matter how much higher they might go, it effectively means that companies won't be able to ship goods back and forth. Importers and exporters will be virtually cut off from trading between the U.S. and China, which of course will have a lot of implications for many industries in the U.S. who rely on imported goods either directly or indirectly.
Now, you've been watching this up and down of the markets. We saw a historic drop in the market. We saw a historic gain in the markets just ever since April 2nd, when Trump made these reciprocal tariff announcements. How is that playing out? I mean, how do you see that volatility playing out in the next few weeks? Are things going to level out, or?
No, I think the volatility is likely to continue. Historically, when you get moves like this, they rarely suddenly just stop all of a sudden and go back to being kind of placid markets. I think you're going to be in for at least another few weeks or months of high volatility. You're going to get big sell-offs and big rallies. The market is extremely sensitive to every headline that comes across regarding tariffs or other macroeconomic policies or the Federal Reserve. Today, I think there was some news that suggested the Fed would step in if markets got really out of line. They're not, and so the Fed will probably not step in anytime soon. But it was enough to cause investors to want to at least maybe cover some shorts and buy. So I think there's a lot of volatility that's going to continue. In part because traders are so kind of confused, and because the underlying driver of all this, the Trump tariffs, are still there and don't seem to be going anywhere anytime soon. So as long as that uncertainty is this high, I think it's going to be very difficult for the market to settle down.
Now, look, we're talking about the markets. We're talking about Wall Street. Obviously, volatility there is just driving traders crazy. I'm sure people like yourself are having a whirlwind of the past couple of days, weeks. But what does all this mean for the American consumer? What does it mean for Main Street?
I think for the average consumer, what they're going to be seeing pretty soon is higher prices at the grocery store and the stores. And I think in some cases, and maybe even in a few weeks, there'll be things that they used to be able to buy easily, whether it's from Amazon or online or within a store, that which simply won't be there anymore. They won't be shipped because the producers, the importers, and things like that won't be able to source them or to pay for them. And then they'll also, of course, they might see their 401k in their retirement portfolios being volatile and coming down, which is going to be a worry. So you might have a little bit of effect on that. But autos in particular are going to be impacted heavily. and anything that goes through goes through China is going to be impacted heavily. So I think you're going to start to see that show up in stores, things you buy, and as well as in your investment portfolios.
Now, yeah, I mean, these tariffs are going to bring some significant changes for consumers, for Wall Street, for traders, and so on. But these tariffs aren't only about the economy. I mean, there's a certain principle. Trump talks about fair trade and ensuring that the U.S. is treated fairly. Is that sentiment shared amongst your peers?
I would say no, in the sense that none of the economists or strategists, other people that I would consider peers, would think that anything like this would be the way to deal with concerns about trade between the U.S. and other countries. Generally speaking, most economists view tariffs as a very poor way to address trade disputes or trade imbalances, that there are better ways to deal with them. And normally new trade treaties and trade negotiations go on for many months and sometimes years to work out very specific arrangements around specific products and specific countries. Anything that's like this that is across the board, or almost every country and every product, even things that we don't make in the U.S. and can't make in the U.S., or agricultural products that we can't grow here. The fact that these things are so comprehensive and so astronomically large compared to where tariffs and other things have been historically in the last 10, 20, 30 years, means that they're far, far out of proportion of any kind of normal kind of trade concerns or whether the U.S. is being treated fairly. I think the U.S. has generally benefited a lot from the trade that it's been doing over the last several decades in many ways, and so disrupting it will be a big net negative for the U.S. Either way, and the uncertainty that comes with it will certainly be.
Okay, Sam, I want to get your take on this. Chinese regime leader Xi Jinping is calling on the EU, the European Union, to unify with China against Trump's tariffs. What incentive does the EU have to side with China over the U.S. in this instant?
Well, yeah, I don't think the EU has a lot of incentive to align with China, broadly speaking. But I think everyone is now looking for ways to, reduce their exposure to the U.S. or to find other ways to get the goods that they need without having to go through U.S. and pay these tariffs and other things. So I think everyone, the EU included, is looking for alternatives, and China is, I think, trying to kind of offer some alternatives for ways to deal more directly with the EU and to try to put pressure on Trump and the administration to scale back these tariffs. I think the pressure is going to come both from outside the U.S., the EU, and China, and a lot of other countries, as well as from inside. Pretty soon, I think a lot of U.S. businesses, and then eventually the U.S. Congress will start to feel the pressure from their constituents to kind of do something about this, because I think it's going to become pretty painful pretty quickly, both within and outside the U.S.
Sam, in closing here, what is your advice to the average American trying to save for retirement with all this volatility in the market? I mean, these are people who just want to retire comfortably in maybe the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years.
Well, I think, the important thing for most individual savers is to keep saving, meaning put aside some percentage of your income and keep, make sure you keep doing that. It might be, sensible to kind of hold some more of it in, say, cash or, bonds, things that are safer, and not stocks for a little while, just because to let yourselves kind of sleep at night, so you're not worried about the volatility of your portfolio as much. But I think the key thing is to keep saving, keep investing over the long run, particularly if you have, many years before you expect to retire. If you're very close to retirement, you might want to scale back a little bit, own more, cash and fixed income kind of investments. If you think that this kind of situation with the policy is going to go on for a number of months or even years, under the Trump administration may have another 3.5 years to go. So I think there's some risk there for the longer term growth prospects of the U.S. if things don't change soon. But I think overall the key thing is to kind of try to stick with your plan and maybe just scale back your risk profile a little bit.
All right, Sam Burns, Mill Street Research. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Next, the European Union and China have agreed to look into setting minimum prices for Chinese-made electric vehicles instead of tariffs imposed by the EU last year. A European Commission spokesperson said yesterday that the EU Trade Commissioner spoke with China's Commerce Minister. Both sides agreed to look into setting minimum prices. The spokesperson said China's ministry said in a statement that negotiations were set to start immediately. Previous minimum price deals agreed to by the EU have been for simple commodities rather than complex products such as cars. The EU increased tariffs on Chinese-built EVs to as much as 45% last October. The EU spokesperson added that the next meeting between European and Chinese officials is expected to be held in Beijing in July. According to the Internal Revenue Service, people unable to file their 2024 tax returns by tax day next Tuesday should consider requesting an extension. The IRS also said that there is still time to file federal income tax returns electronically and request direct deposit of any refund. If you need an extension, the IRS said you can request one through IRS Free File by filing a Form 4868 and sending it in electronically or by mail by April 15th. The IRS notes that even when a request is granted, it does not give the taxpayer the right to postpone paying their taxes. If taxes due on April 15th are not paid on time, interest will start accruing on the unpaid balance at the rate of 7% per year, compounded daily. More than $179 billion in tax refunds have been issued by the agency so far this year, up almost 6% from last year. Next, U.S. wholesale prices fell last month. It's an indication of a strong economy before the bulk of U.S. trade policies kicked in. In Labor Department data released Friday, the Producer Price Index showed that prices paid to producers fell 0.4% in March from the month before and slowed on an annual basis to 2.7%. The PPI is a closely watched measure of wholesale inflation. It serves as a potential bellwether for retail-level inflation in the months ahead. This index also is being scrutinized to gain insight as to the initial impacts of President Trump's sweeping new and proposed tariffs. The Chinese Semiconductor Association says U.S. chip makers that outsourcing manufacturing will be exempt from China's retaliatory tariffs. Given the highly specialized and multi-country nature of chip supply chains, there was uncertainty within the industry about how tariffs would be applied to chip imports. According to chipmaker platform EE-Top, for U.S. chip designers like Qualcomm and AMD that outsource manufacturing to Taiwanese chipmaker TSMC, Chinese customs authorities will classify these chips' place of origin as Taiwan, and Chinese tariffs won't apply. The high tariff rate will still apply for chips made in the U.S. The chief investment officer at Running Point Capital said China's exemption for outsourced U.S. chip makers appears to be a calculated move to maintain economic stability and encourage foreign investment in local manufacturing. Bernstein analysts said the move was a big surprise to the markets, as investors generally considered the location of packaging to be the country of origin, not the location of fabrication, and it's much more difficult to shift fabrication. JP Morgan CEO Jamie Dimon addressed what he described as considerable turbulence facing the economy. This is despite his firm posting quarterly earnings that beat Wall Street estimates. Dimon said the global trade war is adding to an uncertain economic environment that the world's largest bank will continue to navigate for the foreseeable future. Despite surging revenue from JP Morgan's markets and investment banking businesses, Dimon said recent turmoil threatens those units. He also said inflation remains sticky as parts of the economy like housing have not receded from the price hikes in recent years. The U.S. dollar fell to the weakest level against the euro in 3 years this morning. The greenback weakened nearly 2% by 5 a.m. Eastern Time to hit $1.14 against the euro. That's the dollar's weakest value against the euro since February 2022. The U.S. dollar index, which measures the dollar's value against other major currencies, had also weakened 1.3% by the same time. GNC, a national supplement retailer, is actually a Chinese-owned company, and a number of GNC stores are located on U.S. military bases. A bill is being introduced in Congress that would remove those stores. 3 senators and 1 congressman are calling it a matter of national security. NTD's Sean Marshall has more.
Some may not know that GNC, the popular supplement retail chain, is owned by a Chinese company. Ultimately, under the control of the Chinese Communist Party, the company operates over 80 stores on American military bases. Senators Tom Cotton, Rick Scott, and Ted Budd are introducing a bill that would ban GNC and other stores controlled by China and other hostile regimes from operating on U.S. military bases. Congressman Pat Harrigan introduced companion legislation in the House of Representatives.
Let me be clear. A foreign adversary has a physical, ongoing presence on our military installations.
They're expressing concern that GNC operates with almost no oversight, has access to data on military personnel, and answers directly to a hostile foreign regime.
This is not just about names and addresses. It's about behaviors, patterns, and vulnerabilities. The Chinese government has the tools they need to build detailed, individualized profiles on our troops, tracking habits, routines, deployment cycles, and even psychological flags. Everything a hostile intelligence service needs to start shaping a target.
GNC used to be American-owned and was founded in 1935. It grew from a single store in Pittsburgh into a national chain until filing for bankruptcy in 2020. At that point, it was acquired by China's state-run Harbin Pharmaceutical Group.
That's why I've introduced the Military Installation Retail Security Act of 2025. This bill prohibits the military exchanges from allowing any company owned or controlled by the governments of China, Russia, Iran, or North Korea from being able to operate a physical location on our military installations. It terminates existing contracts with companies that lied about who they really are, and it slams shut the legal loopholes that allowed this threat to take root in the first place.
GNC currently operates through long-term contracts with several military exchanges. Senator Ted Budd's website states that at North Carolina's Fort Bragg, GNC operates several storefronts serving almost 54,000 troops who make up nearly 10% of the U.S. Army alone. Sean Marshall, NTD News.
President Trump says he's working on defunding so-called sanctuary cities. He says they are rife with homicides. What does the data say about this? And visas revoked for hundreds of international college students across the country. That's as federal authorities are working to deport foreigners who commit crimes. But some are unsure of which crimes are worthy of deportation. That and more after the break.
Hi friends, Richard Karn here. Now I'm known as the guy who can fix just about anything, but the technology in most appliances requires very special training to fix. My point is, even I know when I've met my match, and that's why my family has Choice Home Warranty. So we won't get stuck with high-priced repairs.
Choice Home Warranty covers over 25 major home systems and appliances. That's your AC, heating, plumbing, kitchen and laundry appliances, and so much more.
Imagine for less than a cup of coffee a day, Choice Home Warranty can help protect you from expensive major system and appliance breakdowns that your homeowner's insurance doesn't cover. But you have to call now before it's too late.
Every homeowner should have Choice Home Warranty. Your homeowner's insurance is not going to cover your appliances.
Washing machine, dryer, refrigerator, air condition. If I had any issues arise, they were able to take care of it immediately.
Now, homeowner's insurance won't protect you when your home's major systems and appliances break down due to normal wear and tear. But Choice Home Warranty will. They can help cover repairs and replacements.
Choice Home Warranty is the best warranty we've ever used. It would save you so much money in the long run.
Hey, I'm not the only one raving about Choice Home Warranty. They were named a Best Home Warranty Company and Best Claim Service by U.S. News 360 Reviews.
Call Choice Home Warranty now and get access to a nationwide network of over 15,000 technicians and the latest appointment setting technology so you'll know when they're on their way.
If I have an issue with an appliance or something around the house, I just call up Choice Home Warranty and I don't have to worry about that.
So, do what this old DIYer did and call Choice Home Warranty now before something breaks down. Tell them I sent you and get your first month free.
Call Choice Home Warranty before it's too late and get protection for your heating, AC, plumbing, kitchen, and laundry appliances, and more. Call for your free quote today. Call in the next 5 minutes and get your first month free. 800-360-6782. 800-360-6782.
During high school, I hung with the wrong crowd and I never graduated.
I helped Santiago in many different ways, like all fathers do, because he always wanted to go to college.
I felt a little embarrassed to come back to school, but eventually, once I came here, I knew that it's for a bigger goal.
He was very dedicated, hardworking. He connected with his teachers, he connected with other students. That was one of the key reasons why he was able to keep forging ahead.
It was amazing to see him graduate. This was one thing that meant so much to him, and of course, it meant so much to us too.
With the help of my father and having my son, that was all the motivation that I needed. That support is everything.
Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org.
Welcome back. Next, sanctuary cities, or so they're called. President Trump wants to defund them. He says they protect criminals and not victims. Chicago's mayor is pushing back on this. He says his city complies with all federal laws, and he says if Trump takes away federal grant money allotted to his city, that would be unconstitutional. Our data reporter Kevin Hogan is on this story. Kevin, how many sanctuary cities are there, and how much money is at stake with this?
A lot of money is at stake, and it's not just the sanctuary cities, it's also the so-called sanctuary states as well. So Trump is putting into works a plan to withhold that federal funding, which could amount to a lot of money, as you see here. So first, you're just looking at where these so-called sanctuary cities or states, or even counties, where their jails don't comply with ICE, are, and that's according to the Center for Immigration Studies. So you can see they're peppered all across the whole country. And source Open the Book shows that $27 billion in 2016 was sent out to these so-called sanctuary areas, these sanctuary cities. And that's 106 of them that they have compiled. Now, again, Center for Immigration Studies doesn't show that many cities, but again, there are different counties. There's different ways to characterize this. Here you can see Atlanta is being listed as one by CIS, but it might not necessarily be one because their officials have pushed back on the claims that Atlanta is one. So again, there's a lot of gray area here, but they have been known for their policies that do not cooperate with ICE detainers and so on, right? So you see these jails, counties, a lot of them are concentrated on the East Coast, a lot of them in Virginia. Many Virginia counties do not comply with these. So these are the sanctuary cities listed out in the United States, again, according to Open the Books, fiscal year 2016, and their size is how much money they've received from the federal government. That may have changed in recent years, but this is the big data set that we were able to find in recent history. Just to give you an example, this is about $7 billion that New York City has taken from the federal government in the form of grants and other things. Again, all according to Open Book. Chicago coming in at second. This was about $5 billion back in 2016, and maybe about $3.5 billion right now. That's going to rebuild their L train system. It's like the New York City subway, and also to beef up public education. So while President Trump is trying to tamp down on crime, public education funds may be at stake in this particular case. And now Washington, D.C., it's the capital city, and it's also a district that has been classified as a sanctuary city, and that's coming in third. And you can see other ones, Boston, Austin, Texas, Los Angeles here, Philadelphia. So these are all cities that are considered sanctuaries, but they do receive money from the federal government. And we can go further into this if you have time.
Now, Kevin, how do crime rates in these sanctuary cities compare to others that are not sanctuary cities?
Well, that's a very good question. Now, we've compiled a list of homicides, which we're going to show you. So the crime is a very big topic. We're able to grapple with some of this. Here you're just seeing Chicago right now. Homicide rates in that city may not necessarily be driven by illegal immigration, because if you've been to Chicago's South Side, you know that there is a lot of homicide that takes place in that particular area. Here you're seeing New York City. I remember visiting the now closed migrant intake center at the Roosevelt Hotel, and a lot of money was funneled from the city to keep that program going, and maybe some of that is overlap from the federal government. Here in Los Angeles, again, it's not clear how much illegal immigration is contributing to the homicide rates, but when you look at the data, the homicide rates in some of these sanctuary cities shown here in purple, like for example, New York to Washington, D.C., Chicago, you see that, and again, any homicide is obviously a very serious problem that needs to be brought down to zero, but per 100,000 people in your population, New York has a homicide rate of just under 4. So that's relatively low compared to some of these others. Chicago, you could see it's 21, and in Washington, 26. But let's take some of these cities that are not considered sanctuary cities that are on the higher end for their homicide rates in orange here, yellow, orange, and you can see that on average, they have about 2 more homicides per 100,000 people. I mean, an average of about 9 here, maybe an average of about 7 there. And that's just showing you that it's not necessarily that these sanctuary cities have higher homicide rates. So while President Trump calls these sanctuary cities so-called death traps, the data does not necessarily bear that out, in that these other cities like Little Rock, Arkansas, I mean, that's not considered a sanctuary city, but yet it has a higher homicide rate than some of these other sanctuary cities like New York, Los Angeles, and so on. So on average, some of these non-sanctuary cities on the upper end may have a little bit higher homicide rates. And furthermore, there's a study by the Cato Institute. They looked at Texas, and they found that illegal immigrants were actually 37% less likely to commit crimes than the rest of the population. But at the same time, there are some very high-profile instances of murders carried out by illegal immigrants, for example, that committed on Laken Riley, whose life was sadly taken at the University of Georgia. So that's what President Trump is seeking to address in this. Back to you.
And of course, you know, people who lose their family members to people who came across the border illegally, you know, look at the policies that have welcomed those people into the country and feel almost perhaps slighted. Kevin Hogan, Data Hub, thank you. We have breaking news. A Louisiana immigration judge rules that Columbia University activist Mahmoud Khalil can be removed. That's for violating the terms of his green card by engaging in anti-Jewish protesting and taking away the rights of others. Khalil has until April 23rd to appeal. Next, Judge Jaime Comins said she had no authority to question Secretary Marco Rubio's determination. She said if Khalil's attorneys don't meet that deadline, she will order him deported either to Syria, where he was born, or to Algeria, where he is a citizen. Rubio revoked Khalil's green card over his engagement in pro-Palestinian protests at Columbia and ordered his removal. He relied on a rarely used federal statute from the 1950s that played a major role in shaping American immigration during the Cold War. Under the law, the Secretary of State has the authority to revoke a green card if he determines the immigrant's activities could threaten the foreign policy of the United States. Khalil's lawyers have challenged the legality of his detention, saying the Trump administration is trying to crack down on free speech protected by the U.S. Constitution. Khalil, a permanent legal resident, was detained by federal immigration agents on March 8th in the lobby of his university-owned apartment. It was the first arrest under President Trump's promised crackdown on students who joined campus protests against the war in Gaza. The judge had ordered the government to turn over evidence supporting its order to remove Khalil. In response, the Justice Department submitted a 2-page memo written by Rubio citing the law. Comins says the government had established by clear and convincing evidence that he is removable. Lawyers for Khalil said they plan to keep fighting and will seek a waiver. Meanwhile, a federal judge in New Jersey has temporarily barred Khalil's deportation. Hundreds of international students across the country are seeing their visas revoked. This comes amid a federal crackdown to deport foreigners who support terrorist organizations or commit crimes in the U.S. But does this apply to minor crimes like traffic violations? NTD's Washington correspondent Jack Bradley has the latest.
If you come to this country as a student, we expect you to go to class and study and get a degree. If you come here to vandalize a library, take over a campus, and do all kinds of crazy things, you know, we're going to get rid of these people.
Secretary of State Marco Rubio doubling down on deporting international students who take part in college protests that turn criminal.
No one's entitled to a student visa. The press covers student visas like there's some sort of birthright. No, a student visa is like me inviting you into my home. If you come into my home and put all kinds of crap on my couch, I'm going to kick you out of my house.
His remarks at the Trump administration's second cabinet meeting comes as hundreds of international students across the country are seeing their visas revoked. Now, it's part of a federal effort to combat anti-Semitism on college campuses and deport students who support terrorist groups like Hamas. Now, the visa restrictions began at large colleges like Columbia University, and one graduate student there, Mahmoud Khalil, is facing deportation. Khalil was a leader in the campus protests against Israel following the October 7th Hamas terrorist attacks. Immigration authorities say that he failed to disclose his connection to the controversial UN Relief and Works Agency. Several members of that organization were involved in the Hamas terrorist attacks on Israel. But many visa holders say they're losing their visas for other reasons. Jason Ma, a Chinese national studying at Carnegie Mellon, says he thinks he lost his visa because of an expunged DUI case in 2023.
I just want my life to go back to normal.
State Department officials won't comment on specific cases so as not to hamper ongoing investigations. But this week, several immigration attorneys have reported that each of these students have had some sort of run-in with the law. A State Department spokesperson told me in an email today that they'll, quote, enforce zero tolerance for aliens in the United States who violate U.S. laws, threaten public safety, or in other situations where warranted. They couldn't provide an exact number on how many student visas have been revoked, as they say the number could be increasing each day. But just over 2 weeks ago, Secretary Rubio said that around 300 student visas have been revoked and still growing. Reporting by Jack Bradley, NTD News.
The commander of a U.S. Space Force based in Greenland has been fired. Her dismissal comes after the officer sent a base-wide email breaking with official messaging following Vice President J.D. Vance's visit to the Danish territory. The Space Force said Colonel Susan Myers was removed as commander of Pitufik Space Base in Greenland over a, quote, loss of confidence in her ability to lead. Military.com has reported that Myers sent the base-wide email defending the base's relationship with Denmark and Greenland following Vance's visit 2 weeks ago. Greenland is a territory of Denmark, which is a NATO ally of the United States. Trump has expressed interest in purchasing the territory, claiming it's needed for national security purposes. The president has not ruled out the idea of military action to acquire the island. Up next, France's Minister of Education has announced that secondary school students will soon be required to surrender their mobile phones before entering school. That and more after the break.
What has lasted 5,000 years was once almost lost. Now, the world awaits the divine culture's return.
I'm Amy Grant, and I want to talk to you from my heart about the heart. I would have been the last person on the list to say this woman has a problem with her heart. So no, there was nothing about my life that said, you have a ticking time bomb in your chest. But I did. I wound up in the office of a cardiologist because I was there with my husband. And at the tail end of that, the cardiologist looked at me and said, I want to see you. No one was more surprised than I was to learn I was living with a rare heart condition. He said, Amy, this condition, you'll be fine, 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 and then catastrophic. A few months later, I had open heart surgery that saved my life. And I owe it to the research and life-saving medical breakthroughs developed by the American Heart Association. That's why I'm asking you to join me and become a monthly donor to the American Heart Association. Please call now or go to helpheart.org. For only $19 a month, just 63 cents a day, you can help fund the next medical breakthrough, get the next person trained in CPR, and get the next hospital certified in high-quality cardiovascular care. If this could happen to me, it could happen to anybody. Heart disease is America's #1 killer, but your support can save your life or the life of someone you love. Give $19 a month with your credit card and we'll send you this special t-shirt you can wear to show you're part of a community of monthly donors working to help save more lives like mine. I'm grateful for the American Heart Association. Their research gave me more time to do the things I love with the people I love. So listen to your heart. I'm here today because I did. Please call the number on your screen or go to helpheart.org now to become a monthly donor and help save even more lives. Thank you.
Looking to refresh the style in your home? Here at Mathis Home, we can help you find exactly what you need during our spring style event. Whether you're looking for rustic farmhouse, classic, or modern and eclectic, we have all the latest looks that will leave your home feeling brand new. Whatever your style, we know that we can help you find it at the lowest price. Because not only do we want you to feel good in your home, we know that to earn your business, our prices have to be the best. So come to the spring style event at your furniture superstore, Mathis Home.
Welcome back. In France, mobile phones will soon be banned in secondary schools. Officials say the decision follows a pilot program in 100 schools which showed positive effects on learning outcomes. NTD's international correspondent David Vivez reports from Paris.
Starting in September 2025, France will tighten its mobile phone ban in middle schools, requiring students aged 11 to 15 to part with their devices entirely during the school day. Phones will be stored in lockers, boxes or special locked pouches, accessible only when students leave school. France's Minister of Education said this is essential for the well-being and success of children at school, as well as for good relations between students and teachers. The minister's decision follows a successful pilot program in hundreds of schools last year. According to university professor Aude Denisot, there's a social pressure on teens to own mobile phones coming primarily from family and friends.
I don't really like to blame parents because I believe that they themselves are victims of this consumer society, which means that, for them, the norm is that when my son enters 6th grade, he needs a cell phone. So I'm going to buy one for him. Here, the watchword is freedom. Dare not to give your child a cell phone. Dare. There are parents who do it. It takes courage.
She also says that the use of computers and tablets in schools hinders children's ability to learn and should be limited.
We can see children who already spend an enormous amount of time on screens at home should still find a sanctuary at school. A sanctuary in which there's no digital at all, no telephone, but also no tablets and no computer.
A 2024 report commissioned by French President Emmanuel Macron recommended banning smartphones for children under 13 and restricting social media access until 18. David Ives, NTD News, Paris.
Thank you for watching NTD Newsroom. I'm Chris Beers. Stay with us for NTD Evening News at 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 Pacific.